This is Literature and Pictures, and we are back for episode 5 for basketball, beer, comics, and more. I have Bankmaster B here with me. How are you, dude?
What's up, buddy? Is this seriously number 5 that we've done this?
Number 5. It's the 2025, just a week away from the NBA playoffs edition.
We got most teams have 2 games left at the time we're recording this. Few have 3. The Eastern Conference is the most boring thing in sports right now. That's been locked away forever, but we have an absolute barn burner going on over in the West right now.
As of yesterday, we had so many teams tied with the same record. And man, Harrison Barnes, if he didn't already ruin the 2016 finals, he might have ruined the playoffs yesterday with his buzzer beater and the surprise win of the Spurs over the Warriors. It felt a little bit like, again, if we want to start with basketball, man, like
We always start with basketball.
we always
We
start with
never end on
basketball.
We always put this up front. We always start. Actually, we usually start with the beer, so that way we can have the beer while we're talking about the basketball.
We can do that too because yeah, we did quite a pregame here without beers, so we got to start with one that is not meant for the books. I don't know if you want to spoil already. I
I
have
will. I
one.
have 2 beers. One of which is decidedly better than the other, so I will do that one. It's also the other one. I want to keep a surprise until we do it because I think it's perfect. And I had to look really hard for it, so we're not doing that one.
Well, I have
But
some down here that should be a surprise for the second book we want to discuss, but I don't know if I can make it that
hey,
far on
listen,
just
if
one
you
beer
wanna
until
if you
then.
wanna hold off, that's fine. You'll just watch me crack
I'll have
this.
one. I'll have a poker. I couldn't
That's
find anything.
that's the same brewery that you had for the last one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's the brewery, the only brewery here. They own like 90% of the more 100, pretty much 100% of the market. Um, but I felt that it's the closest to DMZ. By the way, for anyone who can't wait, we're going to talk about DMZ by Brian Wood, and we're going to talk about Anzuelo, um,
Anzuelo. Yeah.
Anzuelo, because she is Spaniard.
Emma
Uh,
Ríos.
so, uh,
Yes, she
uh,
is Spanish from Spain.
from Spain, so
España.
Anzuelo. And those 2 books will be discussed in an hour or so. I'll put chapter markers later. But cheers.
Prost.
Prost.
I'll
So
say
no,
what this is when we're actually covering a little bit later. This is my Anzuelo, or as you point out, if we're doing Castilla in Spain, Anzuelo beer. It's real good. You'd hate it.
it's an IPA. No,
It is an IPA.
it is an IPA. No, poker, I figured it's the closest to DMZ. Like, if he was a bad poker player in the beginning, he becomes better at it throughout the book. Kind of the stretch I took there.
I mean,
I'm
also
way better with my reference with the other beers. So
you do get I don't want to jump ahead too much, but that last arc, the island where you get free states and you get the U.S. Army, they're like
they're
they're
playing.
hanging out. They're probably playing some poker.
Yeah, let's go with that. Like that. But the Warrior season, man, so weird. They started 12
The
and
fact you
3.
even have a season right now, like legitimately, in January, you did not think this was happening.
Well, let's go back to our last meeting, episode 4. And you didn't say it outright, but I could see it in your face and between the lines. You doubted that the Warriors would even play for a play-in spot. You're like, you really think they would make the play-in? It's like that's spot 10. Yes, they would make 10 play-in. But the
Listen,
fact that they are having a chance to do well, there's still, I think there's a chance to go to 4th seed. Super unrealistic. It's more
I
realistic
think
to do 6th seed.
technically because Lakers are holding the 3 seed right now, right?
Yeah, but they hold the tiebreaker too. So I don't
Oh,
think
okay. Because I was going to
that
say
is
I was
not
looking at
possible
it today.
anymore.
Mathematically, they can tie, but if they've got that, yeah, then
Yeah. But yeah, no, the season started great. 12 and 3. We're like, yeah, well, we're gonna be safe in the playoffs at this point. Like it was like you could anticipate that OKC was gonna go the way they went. But it wasn't that like it was still very early. The Cavs and the Thunder were kind of the surprise teams there.
Yeah.
But you
Because
knew it
Cavs
wouldn't
started with like
last.
21 straight victories or something like that. I
Yeah.
remember you getting that text, because it was the Celtics that knocked him off, and you were like, "Thank you." I was worried about
Yes.
that
record.
Warriors record.
Andrew Bogut and me, like I'm listening to his podcast, and he was getting like, "Dude, they're breaking my records." They didn't, but yeah. So that was a great start, and then it was the Spurs. Actually, the Nets and the Spurs, two back-to-back games where the Warriors were up by like 17 points or 17, 18 points in the third quarter, and they still lost both of those games against those horrible teams that are not good this season. And they had two back-to-back
Put some
losses.
respect on the Spurs. Before Wemby went down, the Spurs were a legitimate team.
They weren't contending for play-in either, though.
They were contending for play-in. They were hovering around.
I mean, okay, maybe in the I don't.
They were hovering somewhere between like the 8 and the 10 seed. In fact, I think there was a while where they were around. They were better than 500 before he went down.
Okay, I can't fact check that right now, but yeah, back then it was like we should beat them easily, like both the Nets and the Spurs at the beginning of the season. We lost both after being up by so many points towards the end of the game. I was like, oh, that's not good. And then they started being behind by the same amount of points, like more by 20, 25 points. And then they started against the Lakers. They came back from 20 down, led towards the end of the game, and still lost. So they were just very creative in finding ways of how to lose, whether being up by a lot, being down by a lot, making it competitive in the end, and then still it didn't go their way. So that, yeah, we're getting into February trade deadline where they were out. They were 12th, I think, 12th seed.
I was feeling very good about you think there'll be a plan? Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I'm glad for you. Sometimes it's hard to see when your team's out of it, but good for you.
I know we talked and I wasn't that convinced of that trade. No, I was so wrong. I was so wrong about the trade. I felt we gave up too much, but no.
There is, short of trading Curry, like there is not enough you could have traded to get Jimmy Butler. And the thing is, we have seen this time and time again. This is the Jimmy Butler experience. It's going to end terribly. There will probably be some point where either he or Draymond will stab the other person, and it's going to go terrible. The vibes are going to be bad, but while it's good, it's going to be so good. This has happened every single time.
While we have Buddy Hield, we have the scapegoat, and Draymond Green and Jimmy Butler will team up to just yell at Buddy Hield. So in that respect, I'm okay for this season. Next season's going to look different because I don't think Kerr is that happy either about how Buddy plays. So I don't think he'll be around next season. But for this year, I'm good that there will be no fighting.
You'll still have good Jimmy and Draymond.
Playoff Jimmy.
They're still on the same page. It's the year after next year. That's when it's going to be like, all right, things are going bad.
Or the year after next year, he doesn't have a contract, and Curry will be 38. I think
you signed him to a 2-year extension, so both guaranteed. So he's guaranteed next year. It's the year after that. That's where the last year of his 2-year extension, where it's going to be, things are going to be going badly.
Yeah. So,
but I mean, again, legitimately, when he was in Miami, he took a team of nobodies, and I say that respectfully, but a team of nobodies every single year to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Celtics and beat them one of the years. Jimmy Butler didn't do that. The Heat didn't do that. Jimmy Butler did that year in and year out, because that's what Jimmy Butler does when you have Jimmy Butler who gives a crap.
And so he is not putting up big numbers. I had that discussion with Dom yesterday on Discord, but he's not putting up big numbers. But what he does, he's opening so much space for Stephen Curry, who's finally not like getting ganged up, other than by the Rockets the other day and the referees allowing it. That he has finally the space he hasn't had since Klay Thompson was good. And that allows him to have his like 40-point nights.
It was weird seeing Curry being mortal for that brief stretch of the season because to your point, the rest of the offense wasn't there, so an entire team got to just like glom onto him and say, "You guys go figure." I mean, it was honestly, it reminded me of that that Celtics Warriors finals where they basically did that, but like reverse with Marcus Smart, where it was like, we're defense, we're gonna play, let Smart have whatever, and we're just gonna double at whoever has the ball because we're just gonna take whoever's like man is on Smart and just move them all around. And they were like, you can't play that way. Whereas with you guys, it was like, we'll make anybody else beat us, and just Curry can't be the one. He's like, well, I have no space. The second Jimmy got here and he got the slightest bit of space, just back to being mad. I mean, there was that one shot on that Lakers game we were watching together where it was so prime Curry. It was something like the third quarter, and it was like he caught the ball, the guy's standing there, he doesn't even have time to react, the defender get his hand up, and just Curry just boom.
And the other thing that Butler brings to the table is the intensity and the motivation, like, and the will to just power through, pull the foul. We were worse, like, in the league during that bad stretch in layup percentage and free throw percentage. And just, you can't win games with like missing layups, like all the time. So Butler, I feel like he gathered others around him. Kuminga coming back from injury, you feel like Kuminga is sticking more to Butler because it's a similar player type. Like, they're not shooting too many threes, they're just driving to the basket, and Kuminga didn't have someone showing him how to before. Curry is not necessarily like powering through defenders because he gets no foul calls and gets banged up way too fast. Plus he's playing with like a bruised tailbone or something. But yeah, no, that switched around the intensity. Now we see Porzingis like Podzinski
already in the Celtics. Already the Celtics, but
I'm too much thinking about the Celtics already. But no, Podzimski pulling to the basket, pulling fouls there as well, and so do others. So fast forward to last night, that was in their control. Now it is not anymore, because again, the Spurs, who initially started that bad stretch of games, now kind of came out of nowhere and surprised the Warriors. So now the Warriors have to win their last two games against the Blazers and against the Clippers. And at least the Grizzlies have to lose one.
Clippers are another one there that just, Kawhi came back healthy, and now suddenly it's the team we all have been saying, like, watch out. When the Clippers are healthy, they're going to be good. And like, it just became this joke. And now that joke is finally coming to fruition. So, yeah.
Yeah, now we have to win those two, and the Grizzlies. So the Grizzlies still have 3 games. They're playing right now, I think probably still in the first quarter. They have to lose 1 out of 3.
Of the Grizzlies, because I've liked them all season. I've thought that they were a better team than their record showed. And then they fired Taylor Jenkins with like 10 games left, which was absurd at the time. Now that's the longest leash we've seen in the world, now that we're in a post Mike Malone fired from Denver with 2 games left world. So I have no idea what to make of that team. On paper, I still believe in it, but we've got a EuroLeague coach who's coming in, who's a rookie, who I don't know how involved he was with that team, what he was doing. Like, so many questions.
But everyone keeps winning again, other than yesterday's. But some of them play against each other. So again, Timberwolves versus Grizzlies today. One of them will fall and be out of the picture. I mean, the Timberwolves already are a little bit 1 game behind, I believe. But between 3 and 8, everything is wide open in the last 2 games. Different in the East, as you mentioned. And I know you want to ignore the fact that the Celtics are the best team in the league since the trade deadline, you didn't.
We're talking about my Boston Celtics, my Teenage Mutant Boston Celtics.
It's a nice shirt. I was 1 hour about to give you crap. You're not wearing a jersey, but like.
I'm sorry. That's my bad.
Okay. There you go. The best team in the league since the trade deadline. You didn't do anything at the trade deadline.
No, but 100% not correct.
Best record.
It's not.
Can't deny that.
You look right now, Jaylen Brown, his knee is banged up. We don't know what version of him we're going to get back for the playoffs. He didn't miss any time, but he's saying it's the kind of thing that even with a little time off, because they rested. Was the Magic game, was that last night or was that 2 nights ago?
I think that should have been last night. I think before the war, I think 6.
Whatever it was, they rested.
The recording will come out later anyways.
Yeah. Basically, anyone who logs meaningful minutes on the Celtics outside of Peyton Pritchard, 6th man of the year, was sitting for that game. They will continue to do so for the next 2 games. These games mean nothing as far as their record down the stretch. We'll see what that does for them. Porzingis is always a question mark as far as how his health is going to hold up. We saw last year him go down for the playoffs, come back, go out. Horford, you never know, when's going to be his last run. Drew's had some health injuries, so listen, this team, maybe not the best team in the East. Maybe there's still some things going that we just got to see. We got to see.
Something that both the Warriors and the Celtics have over the Cavs and OKC is the experience. So I feel in a 7-game series, that counts a lot. And we've seen that in previous years where young, unexperienced teams have been kicked out by the more mature rosters. So it'll be interesting. I really hope the Lakers and the Warriors meet in the playoffs, because that'll be fun to see, maybe for the last time in a playoff series, to see Curry and LeBron go at each other. But it's tough to ignore.
I was listening to one of my favorite basketball podcasts is a podcast called Six Trophies, hosted by Jason Concepcion and Shea Serrano, both formerly of The Ringer. And in this past week's episode, they were talking about the most interesting teams in the West. And I can't remember which one of them said, but they said straight up, if they were taking a team that they think is winning the West right now, they think it's the Warriors. One of them said, I think Warriors is friskiest. I think Lakers are most interesting outside of OKC. One of them just straight up said, at this point right now, because of that experience factor you were talking about, got to take the Warriors.
Jimmy playoffs.
And I mean, it's hard to argue that anyone has more playoff acumen outside of LeBron James himself than that Warriors core that you have.
That's why I'm wearing my 2016 Curry jersey, that the special edition with the long sleeves, the night he had that almost half-court shot in overtime against OKC. So if it comes to another OKC conference final, OKC Warriors, I'm gonna wear this one for those 7 games if it goes to that.
The outside shooting that he brings is definitely a difference maker when it comes to OKC, because OKC has got such length. I mean, they have 2 legitimate 7-footers with Chet and Hartenstein, that they clog the paint and they make it tough for teams down low. But if you've got an outside game and you're saying, well, we don't really care about going down low, you can definitely change some pace on them there. I mean, problem is they also have Lou Dort, who's one of the best, defenders around. You got Shea, who's doing a great job too. They're a great all-around team. I think a lot of it's just going to come down to what's that experience factor look like for them.
Our bigs, other than Looney, all unexperienced. We have Post, who came out of nowhere, but he's like a 3-point sharpshooter and huge under the rim. So he actually got a lot of starts recently. He was out for a couple of games with some undisclosed illness. But that's going to be exciting once he's back.
Yeah, 100%. At this point, on one hand, I'm like, I just want the playoffs to start because, in the East, the team I root for, my Boston Celtics, the story has been locked up for so long. I mean, the last 2 months of basketball have not mattered to the Cavs and the Celtics. It's just the 1 and 2 have been locked up. Write it down. It's done. And the rest of it, you can still see a little fluctuate, but the rest of the Eastern Conference hasn't really mattered. Whereas the West, so as a fan, I'm like, let's just get to the playoffs. But the West is the most interesting in sports right now.
The playoffs started a week ago in the West with no team losing, all records aligned, going in lockstep. And yeah, it's
just
crazy, especially with other than the Denver Nuggets falling a little bit down into the mix as well. They were separated first and no more.
Just a look behind the curtain for anyone who's still made it this far into basketball talk. We are recording this on a Thursday, with the end of the regular season being Sunday. So we've got just a few games left, just a few days, and then we get play-in starting right after that. Can't wait.
It's going to be a crazy Sunday, because all the games are at the same time per conference. I think the Eastern Conference games are at 12:30 something.
Yeah, you can just sleep through those. Those don't matter.
And then the West is also 12:30, but Pacific time. So I guess 3:30.
Yeah. So
Eastern.
Yeah, you can just nap until those 3:30 games, because there's nothing going on at 12:30 you need to concern yourself with.
There's so many relevant games. I can't even put my league pass onto the 4-game split screen, because there will be more than 4 games that are still relevant at the same time. But yeah, bring this back to why we are here. The Warriors and the Celtics played twice this season, this regular season that is almost over. And I really hope they both make it to the finals.
Neither time, by the way, before the Warriors got Jimmy Butler. So in this current world-beating iteration, did not exist.
Haven't met. The first game, November 6th, that was part of that 12-3 start. That's why the Warriors won that first one, because they were on like just a winning streak. 118, 112. And then game 2 was in January 20th, which was part of the Warriors downswing. That's like 2 weeks before the trade deadline. And
to be fair, it was not that game was not as bad as the Celtics Warriors game from the year before.
I don't know. 40 points. Last year was 50 points.
Yeah. It was okay. It was,
I don't know, some garbage minutes, corrections there maybe, but it was pretty bad. But here at Literature and Pictures, we're not taking the point spread into account. So win is a win, whether it's by 5 points or by 40 points. And as the rules go, the loser sends the winner a book from their collection. The Warriors won the first game, so you did send me
There's going to be a day, by the way, where I'm not going to send you a book.
Why?
There will be a day at some point where the Celtics will win both. It's going to happen. But yes, I was super happy to send you ANZUELO by Emma Ríos, both written and illustrated and colors and everything by her, hand lettered. This was my book of the year. If I will ever make a book of the year video, I talked about it at the near mint condition year-end video. I adored this book, and nobody talked about it. And I don't be the change you want to see and all that. I need to actually come around and make a video about this. But I looked at a failure of my team to execute as a positive thing, where I could go out and talk about a book I adored that it felt like just completely got swept under the rug and nobody spoke about.
Well, we'll talk about that later. But it is not accessible. Like, it is not that accessible, easily accessible when you start reading it. But again, we'll talk about the details, because I want to start actually with the book I sent you, DMZ. So again, we're not going to make this too political, but the game.
Yeah.
So the game.
I was reading this, I was like, there's no way I can talk about this without getting myself canceled. Like, Torsten is trying to make this the last video we ever make together, because we're going to be off the internet after this one.
So the Celtics beat the Warriors, and me having to decide what book I'm going to send you on January 20th. What was January 20th? Was Inauguration Day. And I was thinking of a book that would match my mood from that day. But before we go into any books, I actually have something I want to share. I haven't opened this box, so still staying in the basketball section here.
Okay.
I haven't opened this box in 3 years. I know what's in there, but again, I haven't opened it in 3 years. It's some NBA related stuff that is from Klay Thompson. So my wife and I, we went to the Warriors Pacers game in 2016. The Klay Thompson 60 points game, 60 points in 29 minutes on 11 dribbles. Kind of one of the kind of only Klay Thompson can pull this off, like the 11 dribbles especially. So we were at this game. The game was pretty much over before like the second half of the fourth quarter already started. So my wife's like, I'm gonna head out. I'm gonna wait at the car because I want to go have a cigarette or whatever. I'm not gonna wait until the buzzer. Me being like, I'm not gonna leave before the game is over.
You're watching history being made. You can't leave.
I'm watching history. I've paid for those seats. I'm staying every single game until the end. I don't care what it's 10-minute head start or whatever. That wasn't her intention either, but she's like, okay, I'm going. As she's walking down to the exit in the lower bowl, I think by the time she reached that players tunnel, was like almost crossing the players tunnel, the game was over. And they kind of opened the court for press and for players to get out, for press to get in. And she was kind of swept up and found herself in the middle of the court with the players like celebrating Klay Thompson. And on her way out, she's like, oh, that's cool. No one, I don't know if I should say this yet.
I feel like if it was in 2016, you're all right. We saw
in 9 years.
We've seen from fake Klay Thompson what happens when you go somewhere you're not supposed to. They deal with that pretty quickly.
Yeah. So she got some cool memorabilia from the Warriors bench. Those are game items again. I love it. Oh, the towels are not even here. You see, there were some towels. But then the drinking bottles from the Warriors.
Now, were they given to her, or did she just like take them from under the seats?
Yes, I'm not gonna. This is recorded.
Yep. Fair enough.
So one of those bottles might be Klay Thompson's water bottle. I know they're sharing those, but I was surprised because I don't want to show the sponsor here because I'm not a fan of that company. But that said, I was surprised to actually those are not the regular bottles you can buy in a store. They are super soft. This is easy to press. I'm not putting, this is like some special made, super special edition water bottles that the players have that no one else seems to have access to that are easy to squeeze and the water or whatever is in there just comes out. But I figured there's no other time to talk about NBA related stuff other than with you here. So I figured I'll build that in.
That's cool. Yeah, I'm not a big sports memorabilia person, but I do have at my desk at work. My wife and I were big fans of the show Parks and Recreation. We included both in our wedding vows the line "I love you and I like you," which was important in that. And classically in that show, in every shot that they do Leslie Knope, she has on her desk a signed picture of Larry Bird because she's from Indiana, he's from Indiana. And I love Larry Bird. He's the legend. I named my dog after him, but he is not my favorite Celtic. That's Kevin McHale. And so my wife, as a birthday present for me one year, she got me a signed picture of Kevin McHale that I have framed, and I have that sitting on my desk. So that's my own little like Leslie Knope. And also I get my cool thing there. So as I'm getting ready to pack up my desk and move it all out, that's like the one thing I'm like worried about. Like, okay, I got to be really careful with this. Everything else, I'm like, pictures of my kids, that's fine. I could just throw that all there. But that one's like, okay, all right, be careful with that.
Got to protect that and keep it away from the sunlight because that signature will fade. Nice. Shall we talk about the first book? Shall we talk about the DMZ Compendium 1?
Let's talk about it, because after we talk about this, I mean, I suppose we're not streaming this, so we're not posting in real time. But yeah, after we talk about this, I think the video is just going to get taken down from YouTube, and there will not be an Anzuelo talk that will be posted afterwards.
Hey, I heard those big companies, especially Google, is a little bit more relaxed on the content and what we can and cannot discuss. So I think all things go
I
potentially.
mean, this is true. Yeah, after content moderation and fact checking was like a big thing, and like, hey, maybe that thing that you're posting, and as maybe it's not real. Maybe you saw that from a site that isn't true. They're like, no, you know what? That's fine. Just signal boost whatever fake story is out there. It's not our view. Yeah.
So based on a real story. Let's first mention that we're only talking about Compendium 1. There's a Compendium 2 that is out of print and goes for crazy prices.
I did not realize that beforehand. Because I was looking at this, and as I was finishing, I was like, yeah, that's a compendium. They always have compendiums, and I was like, yeah, I wonder what the Compendium 2. Like, I wonder on IST, and I was like, oh, it's not on IST. That's weird. Yeah, and then on Amazon, it's like 200. Like the listing is $200 something.
Yeah, I got this when it came out, in the pandemic, 2020, 2021, I think it came out, 2020.
Which was also shocking to me because I had forgotten that DC had been doing compendiums that far back. Like I swear I remember Omar like talking about the DMZ compendium like 2 years ago or like last year. Like I just assumed that this was like widely in print. And it was kind of shocked to say, nope, no, you can't. Like you can still buy from individual sellers Compendium 1 on Amazon, but on any of the sort of like regular sites that you look at for the direct market, in the US, if you're looking at organic price books, in stock trades, cheap graphic novels, in Canada, if you're looking at the Canada site, if you're looking at Waltz, if you're looking at Leeds, Reed's Comics, like it's not in stock.
And Compendium 2 that collects, so in overall there are 72 issues. Compendium 1 is 1 through 36. They're not numbered because those are like kind of mini arcs, I guess. And then Compendium 2 would include 37 through 72. That came out in 2022. I don't know why I didn't pick it up then, but yeah, by now it is going for crazy. As you mentioned, $250 or so in resale. But
I would say at this point, if you want to read the material from there, it would be cheaper to just buy a year of DC Infinite Ultra Tier and just read it all through there.
Yep. So spoilers ahead for the first 36 issues. And where do we want to start? I want to start with Matty Roth.
I figured that we would start with the beer that I selected to accompany DMZ. Because I know you've already shown off yours. Poker was like kind of loosely there.
Yeah, I couldn't find any better match. Yeah.
Going into this, I knew exactly what beer I wanted to do. And if anyone has read this recently, it should be pretty obvious. But much like supplies in the DMZ are very hard to find, I found it very difficult to find this beer, which should not have been. This is a beer that actually shows up in the series and shows up being dispersed by the character Wilson, who is a friend and ally to Matty, who, again, spoilers, he finds out later is actually a crime boss who ran the triads that was there. And he's sitting on a cache of Asian beer that is never named, but it's very clearly, and actually later in the book, and I'll see if I can flip through real quick, you see a bottle that shows part of the name of this particular beer. And it's going to take me too long. I'm just going to do it. I got Tsingtao. So one, I've had this beer sitting here the whole time. So this whole 6-pack has been
warm now.
Has been sitting here, much like in the DMZ. They have Wilson has all the beer he could want, but they don't have refrigeration, so they drink a lot of a warm beer.
So you have to drink it warm.
Yep. So
Thank you for your sacrifice.
listen, I will put myself out for for authenticity. The other thing I didn't think about beforehand, but makes sense now. This is a Chinese beer. It is imported from China.
How much will you pay tomorrow for that?
Oh, I only just bought this yesterday. This was the beer that I was going around for. First off, it was really hard to find it. Nowhere is carried. Like this beer that I've had a million times in every Chinese restaurant. It's the beer option that they have. It's super cheap. This beer that I have, this regular 6-pack, cost more than the artisanal IPA locally sourced Great American Beer Fest winner that I'm going to show off when we do ANZUELO. This cost more for this cheap Chinese lager. And I couldn't find it until I went to...
Why is that, Ben?
No reason. There's nothing going on in our global economic sphere that's affecting specifically Chinese products coming into this country, which coincidentally are all of them. Yeah, it's also a green label or a green bottle, which as a beer snob, I can tell you only blocks 40% of the light that comes in. The major determining factor for beer's off flavor skunk, if you ever had a beer that's skunked, that is one of the 5 acknowledged off flavors, is light pollution coming into it. And this beer appears to have been bottled in October 1st of 2024, which is not as old as I thought it was, but this does mean it's been sitting around for 6 months. And in this green bottle, I got a good whiff of it. This beer is skunked, but that's not going to stop me from drinking it. So here's to our friends
another pandemic.
In the DMZ. This...
Okay.
Once you get past the initial skunking, it's I like.
You have a whole 6-packs. You got plans.
The idea is the more you drink of these, the less you notice the off flavors.
Okay, so would you say, have you had this before, or are you as naive as Matty Roth is going into this tasting? I'm trying to build a segue here.
Nailed it.
As Matty is being naive going into the DMZ.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think anyone ever thinks of themselves as naive. I'd like to think of myself as, an experienced beer person. I've done my first level Cicerone certification for beer. Like I worked at a brewery. I led tours and events. Like I'm a beer knower in general. So I feel like going into this, as soon as I opened that cap, I knew what to expect.
You've had it before.
But until you're in that experience, until you hit that drop site, you're going through and you see your entire, copter go down to an RPG, you see your team taken away from you, and you're whisked away into a site that you've only seen on the news and only very selected, sites and only very specifically fed news stories. You never really know what's happening. That's my segue for you.
You were exposed to the propaganda first, but now you're experiencing the real thing, just as Matty did. So the DMZ is the demilitarized zone, which is Manhattan, and I guess Long Island, as we learned in the last 2 issues, and ish, because I guess that counts. But yeah, Manhattan Island, the DMZ, population 400,000, between the United States, who have retracted towards the east. It's not much space there, but I guess the sea.
Let's pause before any of this. The major thing that sets this up, the whole reason there's a demilitarized zone, is this book takes place during a second American Civil War. So in this particular story, there's a DMZ between two fronts. There's the United States Army, which is the traditional forces, and then the rebel forces of the free states, which are going against them. There's different territory disputes. But the reason that there's a DMZ in the first place is because we are seeing a second American Civil War going on.
Yes, thank you. That's very important, because otherwise, why would the United States have left Manhattan?
This is bad. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make it all the way through this.
That's all good. You have some tea there on the side too. Undisclosed.
I might be out of my tea. I might need
Chinese tea. But yeah, we have the Lincoln Tunnel and I believe the Holland Tunnel, even though that's not mentioned, but especially at the Lincoln Tunnel towards New Jersey. You have the Free States sitting there. And then on the other side, is that Washington Bridge, Brooklyn Bridge? No, Washington Bridge, I believe, where the United States are basically having their front lines. And Matty is a young, aspiring journalist who's flying in with a way more experienced journalist and some troops.
Yeah, he starts actually just as an intern. He's not even a paid position there. He is an intern with Liberty News that's only there because his dad pulled some strings to get him on this particular team.
So he has an idea of what the DMZ is because he's been exposed to the propaganda he sees on TV, hears in the news, and that helicopter is shot down. I don't think we need to go through all the steps. If people are listening, they're probably aware of the book, but that's how it starts, right? Like
I also imagine if they're listening to the specific section that comes after that, you'll do your classic editing and we'll see the pages that coincide that I'm not going to do the work for, but I know you will.
Potentially. But he's dropped there or shot down. Everyone else is killed, and he is left by himself in the DMZ.
Wait, is everybody else killed?
Well, not everyone else. We later find out we are skipping ahead there. Okay, so not everyone.
We already said it's a spoiler stream.
We'll later find out that I believe Victor is his name.
Victor Ferguson, I think is the it's the body of a journalist arc.
The a-hole journalist that doesn't want anyone to take his place. Not even an intern to be helpful or dickhead. He's later, or we find out he's later being kidnapped by the Free States. But at that point, Matty is on his own and he runs into Z, who saves his life because everyone starts shooting at him because he's not a known person in that area. I believe they're outlining what blocks exactly, and anyone who lived in New York is probably way more familiar than we are. I've been to New York handful of times, but I couldn't tell you all those streets, where they are, how they connect. But we have a map in here, so that helps a bit.
I'm a Boston guy. I went to New York exactly once. I was very, very lost, and then I went to Long Island, and that was my New York experience.
Now, I've been to New York a few times, but I don't need to remember street names because everyone is like 4 blocks down. And it's like, okay, you don't need to know what street number, and not even names, street number it is. But
I went to Grand Central Station. I took the LIRR, and that was my New York experience.
That's fair. But he finds himself in a kind of like individually governed by individuals. Like there's no larger entity where everyone is on their own, including Z. And because she's known, he's protected by her presence. She kind of takes him under her wing. And that's how his journey starts. So he starts as this guy, green behind his ears, and being confronted with his perception and kind of de-illusioned a little bit right there off the start.
Yeah, so I think you kind of set the tone there. Some things I think might be worth mentioning. You talk about how Matty, his only understanding of the DMZ is through the propaganda that's gone out there. It's important to note that because the DMZ is exactly that, it's a demilitarized zone between the two forces. this is the first time that a journalist has actually gone in. And so, you know, much like in any sort of war zone crisis, the news that's reported back is sort of the news that that agency wants you to have. And so we see throughout this, there are signs on buildings that say things like the media is lying to you. And one of the things that I love about this story is sort of the human stories in between the moments of sort of catastrophe about how people are finding life and culture and beauty, all while everything is going on, and you never hear about those things. But there's not really necessarily a chance, because to your point, if you aren't known in the DMZ, if you don't have someone that's vouching for you, this is a very dangerous place for you to be. And basically, Z, who is a former med student, who is now acting as the medic for this particular area, she finds him, and being a medic, sees someone injured, comes and basically sees he's injured, and helps attend to him. And at that point, she starts showing him around, and we get to sort of see the different areas of the DMZ with Matty as our ride along character, and that's where we're introduced to this world that's all going on there.
And she helps him establish himself. She introduces him to Wilson, but at some point he runs into other folks as well, like the ghosts. That story came fairly early, I believe, even before he meets Wilson, I believe. We have the ghosts.
I'm kind of surprised. So
I don't know if that's out of order, because
that happened.
That's how it came out.
Yeah. So this was a book. When you send this to me, I didn't know what you were sending me. You said basically, I know that you've heard of this book, I just don't know if you own it. And I was like, how do you know if I've heard of this book? And I opened it up and I was like, oh, I actually was reading this in singles when it first came out. And it's this very particular moment in my life where I recall I was reading this. I was pulling it from my local comic shop when I was a freshman in undergrad. I was going to Earth Prime Comics on Church Street in Burlington. Shout out to my home state of Vermont. And I remember, the first issue came out, and at that point, Vertigo, which is what this was originally published on, was just coming out. Like, anytime Vertigo had a new series, I was buying like that first issue. And this is one that I stuck with for a while. And it brought back a lot of memories of reading through there. And of course, at that point, at the time that this came out originally, this was being written as sort of a counterpoint to the Iraq war that was going on under George W. Bush and the ensuing occupation that happened after that. And, the division that we were feeling at that point. And it felt very of the time. And it was kind of one of those books that at the time, it's just like, I wonder how this will hold up over time, because it's so very much this point in history. And then you go out and you send it to me now, and I'm just like, oh, no, there will never not be a time that this is pertinent, because anywhere you look, you can find analogs, whether we're looking at the West Bank in Palestine, what's going on there with the fight with the Israeli army, whether we look at the division that's going on in the United States, whether we look at Venezuela or South Korea. We just see what happened there with their leader, who basically refused to leave office. His supporters, who were surrounding his house, not letting advancing forces come in. This book was written about a very particular time in history, and yet it will never not be resonant with something else that's going on.
And I also love that they picked New York City. First, I was like, again, this came out over like a 7-year stretch, 2005 to 2012. But it was like, of course, in New York, always the big cities. But then if you look at history, those conflicts have mostly played out in the big cities, whether it's in Yugoslavia, whether you have like Sarajevo, Belgrade, like any bigger conflict plays out in the biggest city or capitals, because that's where the government is. Someone wants to take that spot. In this case, it doesn't matter if Washington D.C. is that place. or here in New York City has that relevance as well, and kind of how it's explained with the unique geography. It makes sense as well. You have only the bridges separating, so it makes sense that that's where you make the cut, where the rivers are. Kind of how natural geography shaped countries' borders. Like you have a river, that's usually the border, and in Europe it is, I believe, in towards the north as well. In some areas in the US as well, but it kind of makes sense. Like, yes, of course, a conflict like this would play out in New York City, and not somewhere in Montana or wherever else. Like,
but Montana is actually where the Free State started. But I think it's very telling that the story, like this, is, despite the fact that there is very clearly a war going on in this book. All you need to do is look at the cover right there. This is very clearly not a war book. This is a book about the people whose lives are affected by the war. We see the soldiers from either side. There's gunfire. There's violence. There is threat of all of those things happening there. But all the while, these are apolitical actors in the wider context of the fight between the United States and the Free States. That fight is not their fight. And I think that's a very important perspective that this book takes through that.
Yeah, it's not about the actual fighting. It is about the people. It is about the politicians in the background and their propaganda, about the media, the role that the media plays, the role that middlemen play, and those negotiations behind the scenes that is not reported in the media, what kind of role those take and where those actors have different takes. And we've seen that in history too. Like, again, I'm from Berlin, a city that was divided for almost 50 years. And you have JFK holding a speech that he identifies with Berlin, yet in the background, everyone was kind of happy.
Ein Berliner.
There you go. In the background, you have a little bit later maybe, but you have Margaret Thatcher later on, and I forgot who was president in France at that time. But there
was it behind that wasn't De Gaulle. Wasn't De Gaulle would have been earlier than that? No,
De Gaulle, Mitterrand, Mitterrand, De Gaulle, at that time. But again, it's like throughout the whole occupation, they kind of liked Germany being occupied, even though outside they had to play the propaganda game. They had to be like, oh no, the Soviet Union is bad and they built the wall and like we got to fight against them. But internally, like we kind of like the idea of Germany not being independent and one state. So they kind of like being kept down. And you have especially Margaret Thatcher, but JFK to some extent, because yes, when he was in Berlin and his speech was not scripted, he kind of went off the script there.
He didn't tell the people of Berlin that he was a jelly-filled pastry. That wasn't
he didn't
scripted.
Say that. No. He didn't. That's not what he said.
Isn't it just like a difference of like basically conjugate, where it like it's the equivalent of like you missed a like in French instead of saying esse, it would just be like
no. This is so the best I can explain this is you are taking regional slang and misappropriate it. No one in Berlin calls a Pfannkuchen, that's their actual name, a Berliner. There's some regions in Germany, they call that pastry a Berliner. But this is like in the US when you say a pop instead of a soda or a Coke. Like, yet if you call Michael Jackson the king of pop, no one thinks, oh yeah, he's the king of sodas. Like this kind of similar.
Those jokes have definitely been made on bad late night talk shows before.
Yeah. But that's the equivalent. Like no one misunderstood that at that time. No one in the audience misunderstood what he was said. People later on like tried to make bad jokes. It was like, oh yeah, this area in the southwest, they call this pastry Berliner, and therefore no, all the other conjugation was right. Like everything else about the sentence was proper German. It's just that again in the US would be pop, soda, that kind of like regional differences. But no, that was not scripted. He was supposed to just be like, we might even negotiate with the Soviets at that point. And then him seeing the wall and seeing the people and seeing the situation there. And then he kind of just like got angry at that. And he completely went like this wall is a disgrace. This is the symbol, like this is why communism fails and so on and so on. He had a second speech that day that he actually went with the script and he had to backpedal. Because again, they did not want open conflict. They didn't want to provoke the Soviets.
Right. It's the cold simmering detente that it's
and
theirs.
It's not us. It's not in the US. It's not in Great Britain. It's not in France. Let Germany be divided. And they're kind of like, okay, that's the Cold War. Officially, we can never say that. But later on in documents, the truth kind of came out. Similar here in the DMZ, like officially they can't say that, yeah, they kind of like the idea of Victor being like, I mean, they shoot him themselves, right? The United States does. And I gotta put my words because, yeah, you're right. Like if we say those things and then some algorithm AI picks that up and like, oh, what are you talking about? The United States shot this guy. Let me look into this video.
YouTube is definitely going to push this video way down.
This is more about a comic book.
Even more so than it's going to be a 3-hour video about a comic that no one is talking about in 2025. Yeah, they're going to pick up things and it's just like United States assassinating its own high profile targets. What? That's not something we're boosting, except on very, very specific sites. So this video is going to get real popular and clipped in like very specific circles that you may or may not want to be involved with.
Yeah. The comic book. Just for the algorithm.
I'm so close to being done with this. I'm very close, and I still have 5 more.
Let me tell you, so you don't have to finish them.
This alone tells me I would have a very hard time in the DMZ. There's a lot of other moments where I'm like, hey, this is cool. Like we have like the art scene, the restaurant where they're growing their own food, the club scene where they have like all of those things. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. Obviously, I don't want to live in a place where like people are shooting at me if I'm taking the wrong street, but like this right here, this tells me like I might be a little bit too used to my own modern life to adjust well to the DMZ, because I guarantee you Wilson's Tsingtaos, for how long they've been sitting around, they are skunked and nobody cares there.
I don't know if you would be living in Chinatown, but hey, you never know.
No. Well, I wouldn't be allowed in because that was the whole thing. Is Wilson says that Chinatown is independent.
I know, but Matty was allowed to
come
in.
Well, Matty was allowed because Wilson thought he could use Matty. Basically as part. Wilson invites Matty into it. Wilson's not inviting me into Chinatown.
I don't know. If you have a press jacket, you might get invited. But
I mean, I've got a jersey with Larry Bird on and some blindingly pale skin.
In New York.
I'm not getting invited.
I'm sure they're all Knicks fans. Anyways. So Matty,
either they love the Knicks for Jeremy Lin and Linsanity, or they're very upset for how the Knicks did Linsanity dirty.
Back then, the Nets were still in New Jersey, so I guess that's the free states. I can't root for those. That has changed since then, but
I still, by the way,
you called him.
Anytime I think of Jersey, I always think of Jersey Don't Suck, which is on the cover of one of the. I want to say it's in Body of a Journalist arc. There's a car on the cover that has those words spray painted on it, and that cover has just like stuck with me so much over the years that anytime I hear Jersey, I always just think Jersey Don't Suck.
Okay.
Just an aside, because again, from back when I was reading that in like 2005, 2006 era. I'm trying it again. I think I got one more in me before I got to throw in the towel and I got to switch over to the hoity-toity IPA I have. But
maybe you got the one bad one, but yeah, let's get through the DMZ. Matty, his character arc. So that's actually the 3 things, I think: the propaganda, the politicians, the character arc of Matty himself, because I think he has a very strong character arc. Z, not so much, but I don't think she's supposed to. She's intentionally not changing because she is the exact opposite of Matty, and kind of her counterpart needs to stay the same. Morally like embedded in her beliefs, in her loyalty to the people, to the city, and her distrust in all kind of power structures that Matty doesn't have. He switches alliances, he goes his own way, he's being chased by either side for his value, but he also plays that game later on. Again, he starts very naive. He learns quickly what he can and cannot do, becomes like accidentally this celebrity because he has the press jacket. And with that benefit, he becomes an insider in the DMZ, and is basically the only news outlet that either side has, or not news outlet, the only source of truthful information that he uses for his advantage. That's his card, right? His ace up his sleeve. That's why the poker bottle, the ace up his sleeve is his press jacket.
Brought it
there
home.
You go.
By the way, if I'm playing poker with you and you've got an ace up your sleeve, I'm not going to be very happy.
That's why I have the they don't do those on Nike. I stopped buying.
I was going to say I'd have a little trouble with having an ace in these sleeves. Not much that I can do right there.
But the sleeve, half sleeve. No, but yeah. Anyways, he builds that knowledge. With that knowledge, he uses his knowledge to get more context, to get better apartment. He doesn't want to move out of that apartment that he was given, even though he tells him like that's not even the best spot like you should be in right now. But he's like, I like the stat. Like she tells him, actually, you're just there for the status because this crime guy, like,
well, that's even the second apartment, because first he moves in with Z, just temporarily, and then with the stuff with him, going back and with Liberty, she kicks him out. Then we get, and the reason that Ghost has to happen where it does is because he meets up with them. He gets the apartment from that guy, and then he's like, I can't do it. So it's not until much later that he gets it. But this whole idea of status and sort of this notoriety within it. To your point earlier, notoriety isn't just something that like is a bargaining chip there. It's something that keeps you alive. If someone recognizes that you are not from there, you're liable, depending on where you're in the city, to be shot at as an outsider. There's certain people who can go certain places and there are some that can't. Chinatown, Wilson sets up and says, this is an enclave that we can be in. It's separate from all of you. We're basically going to build it up and we're going to make it the power within Manhattan. We're going to be the ones that come out of this. Similar to the Kennedys buying up all the real estate during the Great Depression. Wilson's one of the few people playing the long game, but he's also coming from a situation where he knocked over the triads and has the ability to do that. Going back a ways, I think your point about Z not having much of a character arc is a good one. And I think part of that is because, first off, she's not really written as a character. She's written as sort of like, it's almost like she's an exposition dump. It's like she is there to teach Matty about it. She's there to like drop the lore, the backstory. If you're playing a video game, it's like she's the elder that you talk to, and it's like long ago in days past, this all happened. And just, she's, a young med student who's going through there. But in the episode, we get Z's story. We get basically a preview of what it would have look like if the story had centered around her instead of Matty. It's just that happened long enough ago that she's undergone those changes already. She's where she's at, and she is now part of this in a way that Matty is constantly changing, partly because of his experiences in there. But to your point about his local celebrity and everybody sort of pulling on him and trying to use him for their own ends, his own experience being warped by what people want from him.
He tries to become a player himself when he aligns later on with Delgado, I believe his last name, first
Parco,
name,
Delgado Nation.
Parco Delgado, where she's not. So that's why I'm like, yeah, I agree with you. She helps setting up the narrative, but later on, she also takes on that strong values. So she has strong values, and that she does not move away from, because she has a chance to, or actually Matty asks her to. She's like, I'm not joining you in this. Like, this Delgado guy is not up to my ideas of what the DMZ should be like. If you want to play along and be part of this political game, I mistrust all power structures, and I'm not gonna be with you in that. And that's why she kind of disappears, but she disappears for the reason of her having the stronger morals then.
But it's also after, again, just as her being the exposition dump, she's the voice of the people there. And she's saying, because there isn't a government structure, it's almost like the DMZ is a self-governing commune, where the idea is that, there's no official currency, money is still used, but it's, a bunch of bartering where people sort of help where they can. People pitch the trade that they have in order to, sort of get this all functioning. That's the way of life that everyone has come to sort of know. That's their reality. As we're coming out of it, and this is jumping way ahead, but the whole Parco Delgado thing comes from the ceasefire that's announced between the Free States and the United States, and sort of bringing the DMZ into it. It starts with the United States appointing someone who's going to be the voice of the DMZ in the government, and they were like, no, you're not going to do that. We're going to hold a free election. And Parco's basically the only one from the DMZ who steps up as that voice there. And for her, I don't think it matters who it would have been. To your point, the fact that it is anyone who is trying to claim power over that is going against what her experience has been working with the people and what she's come to know. She's going to be distrustful of that.
I'd love to see a version of this that plays in the DMV, but
I would not. I have had enough bad experiences at DMVs that I'm not trying to also add, an active shooter situation where if the desk clerk doesn't recognize me from the last time I got my license renewed, I'm liable to get bullet fire at me. Although it did look like it had some really good tofu there, and I'm someone that loves a good tofu soup. So I'm a little jealous of that good tofu that they got growing up there.
You mentioned the ghosts again. The only placement issue I have with that story is that it's freezing cold. You see the snow; it's in the middle of winter. It is freezing, and the next issue, he's talking about the craziest heat wave. He's even like in his sickness.
Well, in the previous issue too,
it's like he's walking around without a shirt.
In that particular time, you would think that winter is a very, very particular time. So I like to personally believe that during this time, there was a localized weather bomb that went off in the Central Park Zoo. And so only there is it this big blizzard. The rest of the city is completely fine.
Maybe it's a big biotope. They have a big greenhouse. What was the book, Sweet Tooth, where they have that?
Oh, I was just thinking of going up to Montreal and going to the Biodome, and they just have that all set up. I'll go in there.
But that's the only part in that story that was like, where am I? How much time has passed? Because also I don't know how much time has passed in those 36 issues. Like maybe it could be 2 years. But yeah, those climate changes, like it's summer, now it's winter, now it's summer. It's like, is that meant to be, or those issues just came out like very many gaps in between? I don't know.
Well, in Ghosts, so one of the things, and I texted you about this, but I wanted to kind of touch on this here. One of the things that I thought was fascinating about this, going back with my perspective of being a reader in 2025, not necessarily from a political climate, like we've been talking about from some other things, but just as a comic book reader in 2025 versus the comic book reader I was in, I want to say this would have been 2005. It would have either been 2005 or 2006 that this came out, just from like my memories of when I was doing that. But the first issue of this book, so issue 1 is part 1 of a 3-part story that introduces us to the DMZ and gets all going on. In today's comic storytelling environment, issue 1 itself is stretched into a 6-part arc. They slow the pace down a little bit after that issue 1, where we get to see a little bit more on the ground, but issue 1 covers so much ground. We see the introduction of Matty going on to the film crew. We see outside of the DMZ. We see the entire concept of the DMZ, the Civil War introduced. We see them on the helicopter. We see it shot down. We see all of the rest of the team blown up. We see Matty go with Z, going around finding out about the DMZ itself. And I think at that point he makes contact again back with Liberty, and they talk about securing the drop site, and like all of that happens within issue one, and there's such a breakneck pace that it then slows down. But in a post Bendis world, in a world where Tom King, and I say this as someone who is a big Tom King fan, is one of the top writers out there. That issue doesn't exist like that right now. That was the first part of a 3-part arc. That one issue is itself a 3-part arc at minimum.
I mean, it depends on what it. I would agree for an ongoing series that I don't think they started off and said, "Oh, it's going to be 72 issues." I think it was meant to be ongoing, not like a 5-part show, because there are stories that are this, like 8 Billion Genies, for example, was fast paced, but they knew going in that it was limited, like a mini series. Any mini series might have a similar pace, but yeah, something that starts off and not independent, but it's Black Label, but it's a new story, This could be an Image book today, right? It's like this is not connected to anything else.
I mean, that's what Vertigo was in the mid 2000s. I mean, I bought so many of those Vertigo titles in the mid 2000s, and we talked about this, where I was like, reading this just brought me back so many memories. How I want to go back through and like Mike Carey's Crossing Midnight, Testament. Just so many, like it brought back all of the Jason Aaron's The Other Side. There are so many memories I have of like these new Vertigo series that were coming out at the same time that things like Why the Last Man was finishing up, Fables was still ongoing. Like Vertigo was such a powerhouse. And it's like it's hard to overstate the impact that they had at that point of what a new series meant for them when it came out. So to your point, Image is filling a lot of that hole right now with the idea of it's indie comics for the masses, where it's blockbuster comics of non-superheroes, where anything you're getting from the big two is going to be superhero first, and then you can have a secondary genre going with there, whereas Image is across the board, but like it's probably going to be big and bombastic. And that's you're exactly right. That's going there. But also to your point, one of the things I wanted to bring up, the last issue of Body of a Journalist, when you were reading that, did you feel like that was, as it was initially written and pitched, they weren't sure if the series was going to be ongoing? Because I felt like that was written as this could be the end of like a maxi series if this doesn't get picked up. Because I feel like I don't know.
Remind me what you're referring to. You mean Victor getting shot?
So not just Victor getting shot, but then the whole the situation with Matty holding onto the footage and them negotiating. With the Free State, it's about how someone has to be held accountable. You can't do the invasion here. You got to keep the people safe. And, he's like, I'm going to hold on to this tape. And, he gets his concessions and everyone's like, you did a good job, Matty. You kept the people of the DMZ safe. And it's as much as sort of in DMZ as you ever get, with like things tied up with a nice little bow. And I
think it sets things up nicely to show how corrupt the system is, how corrupt the politicians are.
Yeah.
Wrapping. I don't know if those one shots, because there are a bunch of one shots that felt like they took me out of the story a little bit. I mean, intentional, I guess, naturally. I think they come. I don't know if they come right after or this one. There's also then this part of like just the description. I don't know if this was like just hey, those are the characters.
Oh, yeah. The one that Brian Wood illustrates, and it's It's
Gotta
basically
admit,
like the quote unquote the source book issue.
yeah, the source book, where I gotta admit I didn't read all of it. I read, I think, the
I
first
skimmed it.
half,
Yeah,
and then when it
it
got
felt
into music,
unnecessary. Where it was,
venues and galleries, I was like, I don't need to know all the galleries.
yeah, like
They
in
don't.
in a good, and maybe it's unfair because of genre, because like in things like, you can't see it here, but Lazarus, which is right there, Lazarus includes a source book where it gives behind the scenes knowledge of the families that are there. In East of West, you still can't see it there, but I'm pointing at it. There's, the world of East of West, and you get going beyond certain things there, and those are sci-fi, those are like post-apocalyptic western, and in those things I'm more ready to accept that. I mean, this is a grounded story, whereas like in all of those, they're comic books, they're introducing setting and giving you a little bit of a deeper understanding of that. But I don't know if it's just Brian Wood didn't execute on that, and didn't in the way that, say, Greg Rucka or Jonathan Hickman did, or if it is just something about the genre where, like, war fiction, I'm like, that's close enough to my real life that I don't necessarily care about like what's a cool fake club, because like I can go to a real club, versus in this, like, I'm learning about like fake oligarchies and the trade and like these different things. Maybe it's just something with the genre, maybe it's something with the execution, but yeah, that was one that I skimmed and I kind of just went through.
Yeah, I want them to show me if it's relevant to the story. Show me, or even if it's not relevant, there's a
100.
one shot about this
Right.
DJ that's like, if you want to show me how cool this club is, do an issue about it and tell
Yeah,
me in the story, not
make
just
make
like a
that a setting in the
paragraph,
future. And I
200
think
words, and
and I think the idea is that that's what it was supposed to be. So, I didn't go back and check, but I think the two issue DJ one, that was illustrated by Nathan Fox, um, I feel like that nightclub was probably one of the ones that was mentioned in that particular issue, but I didn't care about that nightclub
yeah.
until we went there and I got to see that story.
Even after we went there, I don't think the characters come back later on. I mean, maybe in the second compendium towards the end. I've
Yeah,
never read that
I mean,
far, but
that story was fairly close to the end on that.
that's part of the one shot. And as the one shots go, they took me a little bit out of the story, but they had impact on the overall storyline, because we see um what's her face, no, Kelly dying in her one shot,
Okay,
which is, that took me out a little bit,
that
because she didn't act like, her character wasn't really acting how she was described initially. We don't get her too much in the issues leading up to that, other than, oh, she's this girl, she like is interested in the story, then she hooks up with Maddie, but at no point was she this risk taking frontline, I'm gonna get killed here and I have my funeral arrangements done already. It's like, where does that come from?
I yeah, I wanted to touch on, as I was flipping through, I was like, oh my god, there's so many things I wanted to talk about. So I'm glad you brought that one up. I felt the same way, where it was like they wanted to flesh out the character, but also didn't plan on using her for anything. And so it's like he had this idea that he was going to illustrate her in this way, that like the reason that she's a war journalist is because she's this risk taker who's willing to just walk through things and just expects that the soldier's going to go through with her, and all of these things are going to happen. I had my own issues that it was like, conveniently in the story, it's like, oh, at the same time he's being tossed from Liberty News, this, for a Riccardo Bercielli, drawn character, this smoking hot blonde with a perfect body is just going to drop in the middle of it and is going to be this independent news outlet that'll keep you, going, and Maddie's going to hook up with her. And it's just like, it all was very, very like, okay, this is kind of like, it's a little wish fulfillment. It's a little like very like convenient for all of this happening. And to your point, like, yeah, we don't see her for a whole number of issues. And then it's like, oh, by the way, she died. She takes a lot of risks, and she knew she was going to die here. We'll tell you about that. And it's like, wait, what? That's
I
not
felt like she was just a plot device. They needed like to
100%.
get him
Yeah.
out of the contract with Liberty, needed a reason for that, and then they needed him to hook up with Z. Therefore, they needed to kill off Kelly.
Yeah. And again, it was, I think plot device is like the perfect description of her. And again, the fact that she is drawn as like the most conventionally attractive person, because everyone else that Riccardo Burchielli does has like a certain like there's a very interesting ugly character to like everyone that he draws that I really like. And then for her, it's like conventionally attractive, blonde white woman with large breasts and small waist. And, she's just here. And of course, she's going to be Maddie's, like get out of jail free card. And of course, he's going to hook up with her. And she's just going to kind of come in out of the story and she'll just be there when we need her. And then she only actually like becomes a character when she dies, because
Yeah,
before that it's just like, hey Maddie, I'm an experienced journalist. Oh wow, I know who you are. Yeah, you do. You want to have sex? And he's like, yeah, I do. And it's like, great, I'll be here the next time the plot needs to advance. And then it's like, let's take a look at who she is, but we don't need her anymore, so she'll die, and we'll tell you that at the beginning. But it was just like, why is any of this happening?
yeah. That,
um
and maybe they needed to throw more women at Maddie too, because he didn't hook up with Eve, but there's like some tension there, like some interest there at first until he figures her out. Then Kelly, then Z, and then Amina,
well,
I believe was her name. It's like,
well
oh, okay,
Amina,
like now you're just sleeping around.
yeah, I mean, I think there was something like to be said with the whole idea of like the most interesting that Kelly ever was in her issue where it like talked about her idea as a journalist. And it's like, in order to have that mindset, you need to be comfortable with using people for what you need them to be at that particular time. And the idea that like the little kid, she took a picture like, and she didn't personally do anything, but like hoping that like someone else would do something with, like having a similar, like the kind of person that does that, I understand has like a similar situation with sexual partners, like in a situation like that. um but again, that wasn't established. Amina just, yeah, that was all like, I liked that idea that Maddie infiltrated like this cell without necessarily meaning to. And of course, when you have Halliburton, sorry, Trustwell, when you have Halliburton, oh my God, I keep doing this. Trustwell, when Halliburton's on the ground and they have government contracts and they're performing this, this mercenary work that's all going there, and you're getting all these government contracts, it makes sense that there's going to be things that fall through the cracks, as we saw going on at that time in Iraq. Um, that you're going to have these homespun cells that are going and having there. And I think Amina is an interesting example of like the human cost that happens. And I thought her issue that she had later on, where it's just basically like someone that didn't plan to exist and was put into a life that she didn't want. I thought that was interesting. But again, it's along the way, it's like, yeah, Maddie's our main character, so of course he's going to sleep with her.
But it's also like Maddie saves her, but she doesn't use her second chance because she was already way gone mentally before that.
Well, and it's, one of the things I thought was interesting and important with that is the fact that like we see their night together where Maddie is like talking to her about like, this is the life you got to lead and you got to take these chances. And it's like it's very clear that like he's speaking from someone who, even though he is stuck in the DMZ with her, is coming from a background of privilege where she is someone that's like never had the luxury to think that way. And like she never wanted this life, she never wanted this to happen, and he basically imposed his viewpoint of what her life should be onto her without thinking about what the consequences are going to be afterwards. And that was something that she also never thought, because in her mind, my life exists to end in this function, in this greater good. he denies her that right. And then it's like, well, what is my life now? And there's some growing pains there. And I thought that was interesting. And I thought that was well done. But his whole just like, oh my gosh, it's such a burden to be Matty because I got to sleep with all these women. It's like, kind
In,
of like,
in
all right.
in a way, they placed Maddie also right in the middle. You have Kelly, who again, the band like doesn't care about the kid, takes a picture of the kid, leaves the kid there, which has a whole different commentary on journalism, because journalists in general are supposed not to interfere, just to record. That's
Mm-hmm.
especially in like animal photography. You see, I don't know, a bear attacking a deer, and I mean, what is the journalist going to do, but photographer going to do, but like something else where like the photographer could interfere and stop that from happening, but it's like we don't interfere with nature. In war, that's a whole different level if it affects humans. So Kelly doesn't do anything. Z would help anyone. Like she's the doctor or the nurse and doctor and like helps everyone. And
Mm-hmm.
then you have Maddie in the middle where he tries to help Amina, but he also likes to pick his sides and kind of like it's not fully there with Z, but it's also not as bad as Kelly.
But also just as, and again, I say this as someone I need to stress again. I was buying this in singles at the time. I loved my walkthrough. I really enjoyed reading this, and so I need to specifically thank you for hooking me back up with this because this was like such a pleasure to go back through. But
I'm glad you could
um,
go back in memory lane, back through the Iraq War and back
I'm not
to
trying to that's not the memory lane.
no,
I'm
no,
trying to
not
go
the
back
not the
through it,
memory
but
lane. But again,
um,
it was relevant back then. It is relevant now because of other things. Um, the military. One thing we haven't talked about the military and how they use Matt, because initially they're like, okay, you're the intern, you're going in. Then they're indifferent, like whether he dies or not doesn't really matter. Then they see him as an asset because he's the only one there. He can help them. They send him a laptop and a phone, and he figures out that that's probably bugged. He actually thinks he's bugged, and like until he he pukes his soul out, and someone tells
throws
him
it
like,
all in the
"Don't worry,
river.
you
Yeah.
don't have any smart move on the laptop, throwing that away, but you don't need to keep puking because you're getting sick
Well,
and
and
there's
that's
no
what like
bug, no
Dee told
tracker
him.
in your
She's like, "You're
stomach."
an idiot. Why
Yeah.
like why did you think this was a good idea?"
Then from being that asset, he's a growing threat. Like he's becoming a threat to the US military. And then in the end, he's almost like an enemy of the state because he's lining up with Delgado and kind of supporting that alternative candidate, and the US cannot implement their own. Again, I probably have to read this digitally. I want to read how this continues because I believe that's going to get very interesting if his arc keeps progressing that way in a way that I don't know if you've ever read to the end
No,
to
no,
issue 72.
I actually had only read I think because I got out of comic, at least physical comics, around around 2008 was when I started like my period of like I'm gonna move every 6 months to a year, and I'm just gonna like try out a new city, and I'm gonna try something like and just see what happens there. And like that was like my MO for a little while there, and it got to a point where like I couldn't have physical possessions that like didn't fit in like a backpack, and like I kept during 2008, even when I wasn't living in Vermont, I kept a year of a pull box, and like I got back up there, and they like were like the when I went to the shop, they were like, it was new people working there, and we are like, we were wondering who this box was because,
Do you
uh,
exist? But he's paid probably. Yeah.
well,
So
also
they were
like,
like, let's keep those here.
well, in like my buddy Ethan, when I first opened my pull box, he put my name as Big Bad Ben on that list, and so it wasn't even like a real, and so like for this year that I'm just like not there anymore because I'm not living in the city, this shop is like pulling these books for me, and they're like, who is Big Bet? Like, and like Ethan didn't work there anymore, so like they didn't, so I'm sure at some point like they were he was like, oh yeah, like don't, like he's good for it, keep doing it. And then after a certain point they're like, what is this happening? So I came back, like my my friends that I started university with, I came back for their graduation, and while I was there, I swung by my comic shop and I was like, hey, I gotta pick up the stuff in my file. And they're like, oh my God, you exist. And they gave me a year's
I
worth of
think that
comic.
did you
And I was
introduce
just like,
yourself with big
and I
back
was like,
then?
yeah. Also, I think I'm gonna close my poll because I don't come here anymore. And they're like, that's fair.
Yeah, we can tell. We can put another like whole series. We finally have a space for our image book.
Yeah.
So you don't take up
But
that much space.
yeah, so it would have just been like the first. I don't think the series came out every month, and I might have even dropped. DMZ might have been one of the ones I took off my poll before I left. But I want to say I didn't read much further than Body of a Journalist. I read some of the stuff from there, but there was definitely a bunch of new stuff that was in here, and it was really cool getting to go through that. So it was a mix of familiar, it was a mix of new. Um, and jumping out real quick, how did you feel about the colors in this series by Jeremy Cox?
I uh I like them. I like because you can tell, I mean that's the oldest trick in the book, but like backflashes being having a different color set, color tone. I like the colors. I like the print quality. My issue, so again, the glue doesn't hold up over over
Oh,
too much. I had a
yeah,
few
I definitely
pages
did not have
falling out.
my binding is holding strong right here.
I have that crease here right
Yep,
through the middle
nope,
and around that spot. I have about 20 pages that
yep. You can see
are
right there
falling out.
the that
So
eye is looking beautiful. Definitely
that's
some gutter
nice.
loss that I had.
I've
Yeah,
I
you.
have a
I
lot
mean,
of
if it makes you
used
feeling better, I
pages.
had some gutter loss in this that you definitely don't have. You can read right to the bleed.
I had to take those 20 pages out separately, and I had to like be very careful continuing the next few pages until like 5 to 10 pages after. I was like, okay, I feel good again putting this book down on the tables and keep reading. And it didn't happen again. What is this one crease in the right through the middle where the glue didn't hold?
So anyway, all of that is to
I
say,
like the colors. I did like the art. I was it was a little bit off-putting to see that change, but in modern comic nowadays it's normal, right? Every arc has a different artist kind of
I
towards
really
the
like
end when the
Nathan Cox, who
when it
did
keeps
some of
changing.
the fill in stuff. But you know, I do like that for the most part. Riccardo Bercielli
Yeah.
does that.
I like the art in the first arc the most. So it
That
starts off
so
with the best arc.
that's my point. So in the first arc, and I talked about how Bercielli draws most of his characters like as kind of ugly. Like no one's really clean. Everyone's a little bit dirty. They're not pretty, and I really like that for this. And in the first arc, I feel like the colors kind of match that. So like you look here, like it's Jeremy
Yeah.
Cox is mostly using flats.
Mhm.
There's not necessarily a lot of blending. You can see like some clear places where, like in faces, you can
Even
see
no
like
color. Completely black and white. I don't know what my camera does here. There is some weird overlay.
it's
See
not
if
even
it
like the choices of the black and white, but it's
still see.
like especially for the people where like you can see the color isn't being blended. It's a very specific look. And I think that fit DMZ really, really well. And then as you get further on, I feel like Jeremy Cox as a colorist almost like started getting better. And the better that he was as sort of like a traditional colorist, I think the less it sort of fit DMZ. So like for
Mm.
instance, like this page, when you look at
Yeah.
their uniforms, like the greens that are there, they all kind of like blend in, and there's a few places where you can see the like one color blending, but there's a lot more gradients. You see a lot more sort of like colors naturally toning as opposed to just color blocking. And I think that matches sort of the tone of the book a little less. And I feel like it kind of goes in and out, but I think this book looks best when it looks ugly. and
Rough.
because
Like Warzone.
yeah,
Warzone
yeah,
rough.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like it's a very specific thing that's supposed to look that way. And I think
Yeah.
Burchielli did such a good job with that. And I think for the most part, and especially at the beginning, the colors hit that really, really well. And there's just a few times where it's like, and again, ironically, I think it's because Jeremy Cox got better at coloring that he did like a better job, that it came away from like what the strength of the series coloring was.
Yeah, I noticed this change in first it was a change in style. Later on, I was like, is this still the same artist? Because I know there's like the fill-in issues that are completely different. But towards the middle, I was like, is that still the same artist? And I couldn't find that information in there. But maybe that's the colors. Even he's trying to experiment with like day 204, I believe that's the art,
Oh,
where
the
it's like
204
going red.
massacre.
Yeah, where it's like this kind of the red style and the
Mhm.
colors being left out, and but it's still not consistent. It's more artsy versus
Mm.
like the actual feel of rough, down, dirty. Like this city hasn't been cleaned. Like there's no street cleaning, there's no garbage disposal or like company picking that stuff up. The logistics of it, like this city is run down, it's a war zone, nothing is being rebuilt really. So it needs to be this uh, color tone,
Oh,
as you mentioned.
yeah, I agree on that. I will say for fill-in artists, Nathan Fox was absolutely my favorite. I don't mostly it's just because I think his stuff here looks like early Daniel Warren Johnson, who I absolutely love. I don't know that he's necessarily like the best fit for it, but like you look at this page,
Yeah.
like that's an awesome page right there, and it just that looks really good with the thick inks, the uses of sort of like large blacks, the scratchy lines, like all of that. Like I look at that and I'm like, and then again, strong use of perspective and focal lines coming in with like that, and just as I was reading that, like my first thing was like, was this one of DWJ's early things?
That's what he sent me.
Yeah, and it's not. And actually, Nathan Fox did. He's mostly does fine illustration now, but he did a comic series for Image recently that I haven't picked up, but I'm definitely going to go back and look into because I'm really interested in this style.
Well, since we're talking about art, I guess it's part of art. I sent you that one page. Let me see if this does anything. I haven't seen that in comics too much. I love that idea, and it's such an easy idea and smart. Like it's so obvious that you should do that more often. It's more not the art, but the writing style. It's like the start of the war, but then the narrator bubble picks that up. It's like it continues with
Yeah,
which felt like
like
the goddamn dark ages. Like that's a clever tactic I haven't seen, but like you have the title or the
yeah, the
introduction to
the
where we
lettering
are, the
there, yeah,
lettering
the lettering I think is done in a really
picked
clever
up
that way.
picked
But also
up
like
by the narration.
the yeah, Brian Wood's script, but then also Fletcher's letters there to work for the sort of block letter, the setting type, and then just picking up from there, which felt like the goddamn day, like just going in
Yeah.
and very clearly the different letter blocking style. Yeah. Yeah. I thought that was cool.
Overall, a testament to why we need independent journalism um, about media misinformation, corrupt politics, and potential civil war. So, any final thoughts about the DMZ or about DMZ?
Um, I loved reading back through this. I hated how relevant it still is.
You would think we've come a longer way, and yeah,
I mean,
why
the
are we
fact
back in
that
this place? Like, why are we back? Not even there. Like, we're
the
even
fact
further
that
back than this.
the fact that Radio Free Asia, basically right before we started this, has had all of its funding completely cut, and authoritarian regimes across the region are basically, cheering for the fact that I'm not going to say independent voices because it is funded by, the United, or at least previously was funded by the United States, but it was independent journalism, that was, and again, independent journalism that was going out and basically reporting in areas that reporting was broken down and wasn't allowed for. Um, I, I Information is powerful, and when you can control the information, you control the narrative.
Well, thank you for talking to me about the DMZ today. I'm gonna keep stalking the prices of Compendium too, and see when it either comes back to print or some idiot will sell it for retail online.
You know what's going to happen. We've got this, and we're going to be looking for it, and we're going to be excited, and then DC is going to announce that they are reprinting all of DMZ in an omnibus, and it's going to be 1 through 72, and it's going to be $175 because of that. And so, despite the
2,000 pages
that we have these compendiums, we're going to be like, yeah, well, we'll just buy that because honestly, that's cheaper than buying Compendium too.
I would buy an omnibus because the pages won't fall out. Oh, knock on wood. But
again, that was not my experience at all with this.
Yeah. You're a better reader than me, or I guess my temperatures here and humidity are not glue friendly. But I don't have any other books.
There's certainly that. Did you stretch the spine on that at all?
No, of course not. You know better. I hope that was a joke. I know it was a joke. Don't stretch, anyone that's watching, don't stretch a glued binding. Maybe I stretched it involuntarily too much. Yeah, that's bad. I even picked up the wrong. I'm holding those pages in my hand right now.
Feels so nice holding it right here.
Nice. I haven't had issues with compendiums. Compendiums.
I've seen lots of people complain about their build. I've got a number of compendiums, and I think my Wasteland might be worst for it. But even like, I've never had pages fall out that weren't my son, or actually it was my daughter, grabbing my Starman and like having me show it and just rip a page out. But that's life with young kids.
That's life with young kids.
Oh my God, this smells so much better than my skunk beer. Are we talking about ANZUELO yet? Do I get to drink the real beer?
I just checked the score, and the Timberwolves are up by 20 points, 9 minutes before the end of the game. So I have a feeling the Grizzlies will drop this one, which means if the Warriors win their last 2 games, they will be 6 at least. So that makes me hopeful. Like,
I don't. The Warriors are going to be a playoff team. You know this.
So they've been to the play-in twice. They've not made it to the playoffs in those years. What makes me hopeful is that
they're going to be a playoff team. I'm saying they are going to avoid the play-in.
Lots of things have to happen for that, but yeah, one thing is happening right now, which Grizzlies losing. So they have
they're
to.
Going to be they're going to be a playoff team.
Okay, good.
It's just going to happen.
Okay, and so 2021 they were a play-in team, didn't make it. In 2022, as you know,
nothing happened in 2022. Nothing happened in 2022. I don't remember that.
So last year they were a play-in team. They didn't make it into the playoffs. This year, nothing. The same nothing will happen again. It's just.
I feel like if the Warriors end up making it, just the way that the NBA is going to go, it's not going to be the Celtics. If the Warriors end up making it now, it's got to be the Cavs, right? Just through cosmic serendipity, they're going to have to run back Warriors.
You mean
Cavs.
Another Warriors Cavs one?
Yeah, that's there's no way that.
Nah, they want to keep this bet going. They want to see another review.
Yeah, the NBA is fixing games to get the next edition of what's going to happen here.
Yep.
Which actually, I do know what the next book I'm going to be sending to you is.
Oh, okay.
And much like uh, I sent you Art Brut because um, oh
You knew I didn't read Ice Cream Man.
no, there was another series that that W. Maxwell Prince was writing at the time. That was a mini series that he was doing with rotating artists, where it was an anthology series where each one was telling the story of an end of. I can't remember what that series was called, but one of the artists that was on that was Felipe Andrade,
Mm-hmm.
and I really liked that one. And I was like, well, I can't send you that, so I'll send you the next best thing.
Yeah, don't tell
And
me.
and you talking about the Cold War just in the preamble. I was like, oh yeah, that's the book that I was like, okay, next time I have to do it, I'm sending him that book.
Okay. Okay. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to beating
I
the
hope I
Celtics in the
never need to send
finals.
it to you. I hope I only ever get books from here on out.
If I get lucky, that'll be June.
Yeah, I again, if the Warriors make it, I think we see a rematch of Caps Warriors. I think that's just the way cosmically like it happens. Like if the Warriors
Man,
can get back there with this new configuration, it's not going to be Celtics. No one else but
best
us
best team
cares
within
about
the last
Warriors
years.
Celtics.
You did predict the Celtics winning the league next year, though. I don't know if you're still sticking with that prediction, but you said they're skipping this year and then next year they're
Yep.
going to win.
It's the way that it happens with this team is that just they they're a down up down up down up. So yeah, they will not achieve this year. Next year they will come back and they will win the finals again.
And because the Celtics won against the Warriors by 40 points, we are going to talk about Anzuelo by Emma Ríos.
Oh, the Celtics won by 40 points. I missed that. Was that recent? That happened. That happened this
No,
year.
this year, yes, not recent. We already
Oh, okay.
it's 3 months ago. Doesn't count.
No. Yes. Ensuelo or Entuelo, if you are in Barcelona. Emma Rios. I love this book. I'm so happy that we get to talk about it.
I love the symbolism. This is a lot of metaphorical storytelling. So therefore, this book needs to be read twice. I read it twice in like 3 days because it's hella confusing at first. So the premise,
So
whoever came up with the premise, it's setting false expectations. It says it's like in a post-apocalyptic world, these three teens try to survive and they choose kindness over violence. That's some bullcrap.
no, I think that's interesting though. It's not something I think is necessary, but it's it's very much it. So it's a desert island book. So you know this group of kids they end up after this big tsunami comes in. They end up stranded on a desert island, and in the sort of you think of a classic desert island survival stories. It's all about the people basically learning how to forage their environment. And typically, a lot of that involves learning to be better hunters, learning to kill better. And this book is sort of a rejection of that idea, which is not why I suggested this to you. It's not why I love it so much. I think that's a cool idea, but that's not specifically what's here. I think this is an amazing magical realism book. I'm a sucker for a good sort of Spanish magical realist book. There was a movie that came out a few years ago, Vuelven in the original Spanish, Tigers Are Not Afraid in English, about the disappearing that's been happening in Mexico, and basically frames that with a magical realism bent, like Water for Chocolate, fantastic short story. That's all of this here in this survival story, and really I don't care much about the whole like rejection of violence. It's more about, for me, what people will do in order to seek a way away from pain and what needs to happen in order to sort of shelter ourselves from the pain of our situation, of our everyday lives. And even if you don't want to get that far into it, this book is the most beautiful thing that you will read maybe ever. Every page is beautifully painted with these watercolors that are wildly evocative, hugely moody. And one of the things I like best is that you can't always directly tell what's happening there. And you don't need to, man. Like, this book can be read and just enjoyed on a vibes only read. This book gives you as much as you want. Like you said, there's a lot happening. It's super confusing. It doesn't have a consistent time scale. Each flip of the page isn't necessarily the same time frame as you get the second page flip. Emma's pretty free with her time scale, so she never necessarily establishes when something is happening after another. Coming from DMZ, you never get 2 years later. You never get, like, this establishing, this is happening. The most you get is it breaks the book into, I think there's 2 or 3 parts, and like, yeah.
Yeah, first thought 3 parts, but they do the first part the same. She does the first part the same way, where there's an introduction and then the title of the part actually comes 5 pages later. So I think it's 2 parts.
Yeah. So you get, partway through, we're looking at this right here. You get that right. That's the closest as you get to like anything trying to like set a timeline. But
how many times have you read this book, and how many times did it take you to feel that you get this done?
I think I've read it 3 times, and none of them have been within the last month. So I'm going to be specific occurrences. I'm going to be a little bit foggy on. I'm going to be really bad at names. But I'm always really bad at names. So like that's not different. But this was a book that I normally give myself a rule where if I finish a book and I'm like, I really want to reread that, I make myself wait and like give it some time to digest before I do that. This was a book I didn't do that. I finished it and I was like, I don't fully get it, but I really liked it. And then it was like, I'm gonna read it again. And I went back through it and I loved it even more. And again, like I love a piece of art that can be absorbed at different levels. I like something that doesn't have to be at one level. Like, I love, like an Alan Moore story where you can read it and it's like it's as deep as you want to go with it. You can get the meta narrative that's behind it. You can get, you read V for Vendetta and you read the criticism of Margaret Thatcher's, semi-authoritarian rule in Britain, and specifically, the degradation of protected classes and things that are going there. Or you can just read it and it's this cool vigilante story about another, about a guy who invites someone else to be like the next superhero pop version of that. Like, as much as you want to read into it, you'll get that, and it's enjoyable anyway. And I feel like ANZUELO is similar to that, where it's like, if you're like, I'm not going to read super into the imagery here. I don't necessarily care about like how far is this different. Like, I just want vibes, baby. I want to listen to some Spanish guitar and I just want to look at some beautiful watercolor art. Like, this book is a trip and can absolutely be that. If you want to look at this as just an art book and like you ignore the overarching plot, it's still going to be the best thing that like you've read, and you've done that. I don't suggest doing that, but that is a way that you can read it. And I think that that's something that speaks to what Emma Ríos has done here.
I feel it has to be confusing at first. Like, first time reading, I was like, yeah, this is a little bit confusing. I like the style. I don't love it. But about 80% through, I was like, I think I get it a little bit better now. I want to read it a second time. Once I finish it, I want to read it a second time to confirm like my theories here. And yeah, I was able to read it a second time. I was like, yes, this makes more sense if you have like if you don't think about it literally, right? It has to be confusing for you to be tripped off and for you to question that this is actually a story about three kids and the environment that they are in.
And of course, it's not just three kids. Then there's more kids. Where are those other kids?
And what
where is
they
civilization behind
for.
them? Why do we go back and see that civilization and then flash back to the island?
Why do the glasses show up? Again, second time reading, you actually realize that lots of the things that are on the first few pages are being picked up later on. First time reading, that completely passed me. Like I didn't remember that Nubero, I think is
Nubero's the cormorant.
Yeah, the kid, no, the main the kid, not I don't want to say the main character because there's three. The kid that has the trauma in the beginning that is being bullied by his grandfather, and
okay, which I remember them not by their names but by whether it was the mer person or the cormorant. Yeah. So again, one of the things I think is important, and again, like I got to read the first few pages and like sort of go back through the word anzuelo is Spanish for fishhook, and you can see like in the typography in the logo for Anzuelo we get the Z creating its own fishhook. The cover tells you nothing. The cover is just like, you want some dope watercolors? Yeah, it's going to be here along with a whole bunch of like hazy sea imagery. But you open it up, and the first thing that you get are these slightly disturbing images of a worm going onto a hook that you push out, and you see that it's a fisherman who is fishing his hook, and you talk about Nubero is there with him. And shortly after that, there is a wave that crashes out over civilization that leaves everything behind and washes Nubero up on the new island. All the while, you get some nebulous sort of self-dialogue that's all happening there. You get the sea adrift, and then we find Nubero on the island along with two other friends.
That's the beginning, yeah. And then this story continues in that world where they call it, in the premise, it's called post-apocalyptic. Again, this is full of spoilers. So let's go into theories, right? Like, what does the water represent? To me, that's like the internal view. Like you turn into your emotions, you look at the inside and about. I think the character that this book is about does not appear in this book. This character is not
interesting
in here.
So you think this is all basically internalized from, let's just say it's the reader, and this is sort of happening inside of the okay.
So
or the writer.
Emma Ríos' internal journey, or a character she created for this. But everything here is metaphorical. This is all representation of something else. Everything is a metaphor. Like you have the hook being a metaphor, you have the water being the metaphor. To me, the creator, the three kids, and later the other kids too. I don't want to compare to that because a complete different, but think Inside Out, right? Like those are the emotions. Like
we're talking Inside Out 1 and then 2, and then suddenly as things get more complex, we add more into it.
Let's have a traumatized kid because her grandfather doesn't give him or her any self-esteem. I'm completely broken by those harsh words by the grandfather. Creates this internal world of self-doubt, self-harm, of, again, so Nubero here being the first character that's introduced. can be first representation of that trauma. And you have
important to point out too that Nubero doesn't speak to begin with when they go on the island. The other kids talk about how Nubero doesn't, and it's not until later that that they end up kind of going back into it.
Yeah, but Nubero being the innocence here, so the childish innocence. And the moment that trauma happens, the trauma represented not by the water. Water is more like the internal. This is like the outside world vanishes. The main character, goes into like the internal self within the numbness of the water. Nubero being the innocence and having to create, because now we're leaving the child. It's like coming of age story too. Like the child is pushed aside. The innocence, that's why Nubero fairly fast disappears. Because now we have Lucio and Isma. Lucio being more the rational mind, the analytical part, the clear thinking. We should do certain things. She's like Lucio, no, a guy. Like that's the other thing with the watercolors. I could never tell if it's a girl or a boy. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think that's partly intentional. Like, I think there's a number of characters who are drawn like androgynous, and it's like it doesn't matter, is this a guy or a girl? It's just it's a person who represents a certain viewpoint. Because
Lucy also mitigates a lot, like fights between. We have a little bit more not angry, but Isma being the survival instinct, because Isma is actually the one that sacrifices the ideals of I don't want to kill to survive, but we have to eat something. And Isma being that survival instinct goes out and does that, while Lucio kind of justifies it with like the rational thinking. Yes, okay, we have to do that, while at the same time Nubero disappears because the innocence of that character disappears. Comes back every now and then. Towards the end of the book, it gets less and less, but at older age, I guess the character finds that innocence, that childish innocence again, as other characters appear, because now the emotions are becoming more complex and becoming more vast. You have the Coral Kid, which to me represents kind of that anger, that because that character is not angry. Whoever wrote this is not an angry person choosing the peace over the violence. And that Coral Kid is kind of the buried anger, or the buried will to fight back at the world, at the trauma, at the grandpa, if that's the only part that's real in here before the water rises. And we see the Coral Kid was jumping way too far, but the Coral Kid comes later back, and kind of as the character comes to peace with itself, you see more and more characters returning. The second part, you basically have no interactions between the main three characters, as they're all being torn apart. That's kind of when the trauma hits in. You have the fishhook, which represents it's kind of the innocent soul of that character. It's small, it carries a lot of weight, like the representation of the fishhook. But it can kill too, but it kills passively. It's not an active killer. It's not a weapon. It's not a gun. It's not a knife. It's this passive way of being able to survive there. But it's also, I think it stands for multiple things, if at all. Like it's a small piece that is sharp, that small silent trauma that represents a small innocent soul there, and like carries all that trauma on that hook. Also, the constant discussion about the worms. I wish I was a worm and was numb to this outside world. I wish I was a bird and I could just ignore this world. Like, this is a traumatized child that chooses not to get angry, but to turn inwards, and having all of those mixed emotions. First, being confused, confusing, until later in the second part, we have more characters coming in that clear things up. The kind of the empathy coming in, represented by that guy character, I forgot the name, the love interest of Isma, where she hangs out with that character the most, which I believe that's the empathy part. Like, yeah, the character is showing empathy towards the survival instincts. Like, you had to kill, you have to convert into this bird to get fish for us to survive, because that needs to be done. Like there's no other way. I know you choose to not be violent, but still you need to transform into this other person. I don't know what that means for the main character, if that's a bipolar reaction or just something that character ignores, but definitely some mental trauma there that the survival instinct exists and therefore things have to be done, but we have to transform this character into a bird that then kills instead of the character killing themselves. I can go way more deeper, but I wanted to just check if you're on the same interpretation. Does that resonate at all, or am I making stuff up?
There's some things you've said I agree with. There's some things, specifically the idea that the whole island is a metaphor. This is happening to an unseen character. That wasn't my reading, but I liked that idea with it. Before I kind of talk about what I liked and what I saw there, we're on our second book. You said you spent more time thinking about your beer for this. I don't have to drink Tsingtao anymore. I got to find out what is the beer that you chose to pair with this book.
Well, it's more the company, the brewery, than the beer. Because I got 3 beers that are called Tres Cordilleras, the 3 mountain ranges.
Okay.
There couldn't be anything more. Like we have the 3 kids, the 3 main kids. Yep. We have more kids, but we got the main emotions here. So the Rosada, the Mestiza, and the Mulata. The brand has way more, but I figured 3 are enough, plus 3 cordilleras, and matching the 3 kids, I picked 3 different flavors, which are the Mulata is the amber ale, the Mestiza is a pale ale, and the Rosada, obviously, like pink red beer.
I would think a Rosa would be a red ale. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So I agree with some of what you're saying, and I don't necessarily disagree. It's just not my reading of it about the idea that this is all imagined. I again go back to the idea that I think this is, whether it necessarily happened or didn't happen isn't the most important thing. I read this as a magical realism book where the lines between reality and the fantastical or representational isn't the most important thing. It happens. But very clearly, Nubero, as we see at the beginning on that boat, feels like an outsider. And so much of this book is sort of about people confronting their emotions and sort of how they're going. And a lot of people happen to feel very alien. They feel like they don't belong. They are a stranger in that place. So I have selected this IPA for aliens. Also, I just really wanted to drink that because I didn't think the Tsingtao was going to be that good. Didn't think it was going to be as bad as it was, but I was like, I like this brewery and I want to do that. So again, going back to those first few pages, the very first page, even the first time I read it, struck me as like, this is really important. And the first page talks about it's all about hooking the worm. And it talks about that worm brain, about sort of that like very simple, like non-responsive brain that just sort of goes along with things. And we see that going onto the fish hook. And we basically see the character say, they tell us that, that our human brains are evolved from these worm brains, that this is the basis of all human thinking, is that we go along with our outside stimuli and we don't see anything. And it basically ends and goes, I hope that's not the case. And so for me, what I look at the fish hook as being is very much trauma related, like you said, like very clearly. And I don't think it's just the grandfather. And, if your grandfather being mean to you is enough to have you either imagine or actually the world collapsing and go to this island, I think there's more going on. I think that is just illustrative of the fact that Nubero is a very sort of soft, sensitive kid surrounded in a world that doesn't support that. We're seeing kind of like a rough fishing village. And what I think we see the imagery there, as I read it, is the fish hook is basically that thing that drags you along through life. And either you can engage your worm brain, and you can basically be on the hook and be dragged along as you're going through, and then just sort of going through that. Or you can engage your sort of higher functioning brain, and you can fight against that fish hook that's going there. And as those forces are trying to drag you over here, you can try and get off the line. You can try and fight. You can try and pull against it. And I think that's what a lot of this story is sort of how each character is faced with their circumstances and what they choose to do and how they choose to fight it, if they choose to fight it. And even in the case where we see characters fight it, like our Cormorant character, again, I'm very bad with names, but the one that continues to turn into a cormorant, Isma. We see at the beginning as them providing for everyone, and it's done as this response that I need to protect the people closest to me. But as we see it go on and on, they point out that you're spending more and more time as this bird. You're not being a person anymore. And we see that at that point, the response to being the cormorant, to going out and having this job that I need to go protect people, is almost like their abdication of their human self and feelings. It's a way that they can sort of step away from that self introspection. This is what's happening to me. I need to confront that. And we can see, that when the other characters are saying like, hey, we're going to build this raft, we're going to get off this boat, we're going to try and go back to engage with civilization. We've come to a point where those characters have found within themselves enough understanding in the island that they think that they've gone past their trauma and can go reintegrate with the world. Whereas the opposite has happened with Isma, where they have found it easier and easier to sort of retreat within themselves, get lost in their job, that they actually, they slap, I think it's Nubero, and they strike out with violence against them, basically like, don't make me feel like I don't want to engage with this reality that you're presenting me. Like, you gave me this opportunity to serve this function for you. I found purpose in that. Don't make me confront myself. And I think there's all these little intricacies that we all going there, but really this book is at its heart is how do people deal with trauma? And again, I think the question of whether it's really happening or whether it's all in a character's head, it's not necessarily something that I thought of through there, but through that magical realist lens, it's not something that I think is the be all end all. But I do love that idea, and like the idea that this is Inside Out, the best graphic novel that you've ever seen, and that it's, let's just say, Emma Ríos is like working through her own things, and Nubero is her sadness that then goes to like her sense of purpose, all throughout, just not voiced by Phyllis Lappin Vance.
I find it interesting that basically all the three kids are the same. Like, again, they express themselves. To me, they represent different emotions, but in their core, they're the same person because they're all insecure. Like, that's what defines them. All of them at some point say, like, I'm not good enough, kind of like paraphrasing here, but like, I'm not good enough, like, I'm this insignificant person. They're all having this, not self-pity, but this low self-esteem. Isma, who wears this eye patch for no reason, because it's not that she can't see on his eye, it's just she wants to hide that bird's eye that doesn't transform back completely. Then we have Lucio, who's ashamed of the guilts that are appearing on the body. Well, Nobara is obviously like traumatized from the beginning, as we meet. Cheers, as we meet him. Post. And I found that you mentioned that scene where she chooses violence and slaps him. I found that actually very, because it's not further explained, but it follows up a scene where Nubero tries to give her the glasses, and that's mirroring the beginnings, like kind of putting the glasses away. Kind of, to me, that was like giving up, right? Like that Nubero chooses to disappear. Either, I don't want to say commit suicide, because that is like, that's also kind of themed in here, but how emotions cannot do that. That's why no one dies in here. Like, no one dies. They all disappear, but they come back. And it's actually said that we cannot kill the
There's
lies.
The whole thing with the shadow self and the shadow, like, how are they integrating their, yeah.
I think the quote, as I wrote this down, we are all you, but we can't die within you. It's like, that's like, we are
That
all you,
that
but
that
we
that makes a
can't
ton of
die
sense right there.
can't die within you. So the characters can't die because their emotions, you can suppress them and they will live at the bottom of the ocean in that bubble, like Lucio does, like the Coral Kid does for a while. But you can't get rid of those emotions. At some point, they come back up, they will pop over. So Nobero giving the glasses indicates like Nobero is about to disappear. And that's why Isma smacks him, saying, you can't leave right now. You need to stay here. You need to keep that childish innocence. Therefore, like, I'm going to just slap you across the face. And I actually said that the character doesn't appear in here. I actually remembered, actually there are two panels where I think the main character actually appears, which is the one that looks like a hospital scene. We only see the arm with the syringe. That brings us back into reality. It's halfway through or so. It's just an arm that's completely out of context, not in that magical world. But there's an arm with a syringe. That could be anything. I see that as maybe an attempted suicide attempt, and that kind of did pulling back the curtains there. And then the second time, towards the end of the book, we see the character, like a blonde girl. I don't know how Emma Ríos looks like. I don't know if that's a representation of her, looking out to the ocean. That's also not part of this world. And looking at a bird that flies in the sky at a pier, modern civilization, and kind of looking into the distance. I think those are the two panels that are actually in the main character's surroundings, environment.
So that is really, really interesting that you say that. So one of the things that like kind of struck me going into this is tackles themes of mental health, which clearly we have a lot of that going on, self-harm and suicide. And that was one where I was like kind of thinking, I was like, we see themes of sort of that, but we don't, there's not necessarily depictions that we see of at least physical self-harm through, like we see self-destructive behaviors from some of the characters. We see, you know, at times when they could be learning to move on and keep going, that doesn't happen. And so that was always there at the back of my mind. And one of the things I did think of as I was reading this is, you know, whether it be Nubero or, you know, I wasn't thinking of it, but as you bring it up, the unseen main character, the idea that there is some type of suicide attempt that they have that is unsuccessful, and the island is basically the response to that, either in a real world manifestation, magical reality, where they have to learn to sort of how to live with themselves in order to go back into society, or to your point, an inside out, where, you know, they're looking at that. And while I was looking for that panel, I was flipping through, and again, the shadow that we talked about before, I came to this where it's talking about the shadow that's all going here, and we see the characters. I can hear them. Hear what? The ultrasound. And it's all put together, and we see this manifestation of the character with beep 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 beep, and we see all of that going on. And when I was first reading it, I didn't think of that in sort of a hospital and medical sense with an ultrasound where you're doing imaging through that. But if we're looking at this through the context of someone who is, you know, has attempted some type of major self-harm, whether they ingested something and, you know, there's something inside of them that's not supposed to be there, or something else, we're getting some type of leaking through of the real world where they're in the hospital, they're getting an ultrasound, and the manifestation of this shadow creature that they're seeing is sort of messaging through the sound, but keeping that real world name, the ultrasound, as sort of, again, that medical thing. Which, yeah, that was not my reading of it, but I like that theory a lot, and I'm gonna have to do another reading after this where
reread
I
it
keep
with
that in mind.
Maybe you're just Maybe you're like, nope, you're full of crap, or maybe it helps in an interpretation there. But yeah, I felt like, yes, the character might be definitely going through suicidal thoughts, but what we're seeing in this book is the internal processing of those emotions, of how, of how that internalized back and forth goes between the characters, between that main character here that feels all of those things, that is being reminded by, I believe that's what the career represent, those big monster type things, because they don't actually do harm, but they keep reminding the characters of the world there and of the trauma. I think that's the career being the entities that bring that trauma, or like the memories, not even the trauma, but the memories forward that can't be shaken off. But that's when the career dump water over them or bring them fish. It's like that's the reminder of the memories. Like, here, there's the exposition. That's the memory. Don't forget. There's more water. There's more emotions that those entities create, because they're the ones that bring new people. They come and drop more people. Those old memories bring or new memories for that matter, bringing those new emotions in. Kids are first afraid of them, but then they learn that they don't do anything. They're just there. They don't do harm. They don't do good. They're just there. Occasionally, they either dump water, fish, or people.
Yeah. And that did remind me a little bit of there was a book that came out last fall from Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Hans. We called them giants. We called them gods, where it was like that same kind of thing about the idea of, and I think that was going for a little bit more of a pet idea, but like the idea of the others, of like these caretakers that you see and you fear initially, but then find that they're not there to hurt you. Which, if we lean into your interpretation, the hospital staff, the administrators, but basically anyone who is trying to help you, that you have to let into your world and get going there, whether that is representational through a magical realism sense, or is just simply metaphorical in in the sense that you're talking about.
I mean, it's both, right? Because magical realism in itself is a metaphor. Like, if you go with Gabo, like the yellow butterflies in any of his works represent the hope, the hopeful situation. And you have themes that are reoccurring based on author, but magical realism just uses metaphors to tell the story.
100%. Everything is always going to be representational that way. And it's, in the context of that story, those things are actually happening, but everything represents something else, as opposed to sort of, it was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine. Wait, sorry, that's a different thing. Before we go further in the dissection of the plot, because I do love that, but I actually think that that's, as much as I love this book and I love the layers that it does there, I think that that's actually the less impressive part of this book. I want to talk a little bit here just about the beautiful presentation, the art, the colors, even the lettering, everything about this book. And I want to talk about the restraint that Emma Ríos shows with this, because I can tell you, if I could paint like this, let me tell you, this book would be nothing but double page splashes of just beautiful images of just me flexing and just being like, look at this image. And despite this amazing, amazing watercolor, where she's showing such great care and mastery of the image, to the point that I'm wondering if, because it looks like traditional watercolor, but she has
some
pencil over it that I almost wonder if it's gouache. And I think I looked it up, and I think it's mixed medium, but it does include watercolors. But normally with watercolors, there's like a certain amount of bleed, you lack a certain control over it, but she is so refined with this. And you see some spaces around the characters, but
you have some bleed, yeah.
Yeah,
if you see the horizon bit, here, you have the sky and the water mixing into green in the middle, where you have some small overlap. No, this is this is pencils, because you have to have some.
I absolutely love, but also like the fact that everything on here, because she's doing this herself, the word bubbles is where she is just not painting. That is a lack of paint, and or just, in some cases, I think she's doing them digitally, but all of that's going on there. And then, like I said, I would be unrestrained with this. I would just be flexing all over it. But then those pages where you do get that full page splash just feel all that more special. We saw before the page where we got that title and Suelo, the next part, but then it feels so special, and it feels like very much the end of a scene when we do get those pages that are just a full page spread. And she's able to do so much with so little. Like you look at that bird right there. There's so little there. I mean, that's almost basically a brushstroke, but it's a beautifully rendered silhouette of a bird against this sort of billowing cloudscape looking over the water. We have these birds that are flying over here. Nothing is overly technical. Everything is shape and feeling and color. And again, one of my favorite things about this book, if you don't want to do the deep dive, if you don't want to sort of really go into it and say, what are the deeper themes at work? You can read this as an art book and have an amazing time with it. In fact, there was one part where I read this I was at the gym. I was on a workout bike, and I was like, I'm just going to go through this section. I'm going to put a bookmark in where like I got my actual read through. I'm going to put in my earbuds. I'm going to put in a Spanish guitar playlist. And I'm just like, I'm not going to read the words. I'm just going to go through, and I'm just going to feel this book. And that was one of my favorite reading sessions I had on this, because everything is so evocative about it. And I didn't get dragged into the whole sort of meta narrative about what's really happening. What are the themes here? What are each of these characters? What are they going through? What do they each represent? How are they fighting against that? Who's giving into who? And this book is a beautiful book. Like, this is a work of art that also has the story to back it up. But I think it would be a disservice to sort of everything that Emma has done to spend all of this time simply talking about what is a great story, but is, I would say, not even the strongest aspect of it. Her panel layout, what she's doing, where she's not doing consistent layouts. Every page is done differently. There's a flow that goes through there. And it's almost, her use of colors and themes, where we don't have consistently blue water, but we have different use depending on different moods and times of day. That's what I think is the true strength of this book, even while it tells a really compelling story.
Yeah, this needs to be bigger. This needs to be at least absolute size, or monsters. I mean, they'll never do that, but at least like absolute size. This is because that's the size of a regular standard comic book. There's not even omnibus format, right? This is pretty small, and for this art,
binding, but this is standard size, and this is all that exists. My favorite reading experience I had with it was, there was one point where I had a dual monitor setup, and I flipped one of the monitors, and I mean, this is like a 18-inch diagonal. I flipped it vertical, and then I blew up the digital image to stretch it through there. And it was like, this is what it should have looked like that whole time. Because it's like, this should be at least absolute size. Truthfully, it should be bigger than that. We should get an artist edition of that, which is just all of the paintings at full size. Because honestly, even with that, it's a little hard to read the words at times.
Yeah, intentionally sometimes, because I feel the lettering is well chosen, that when a character has an internal monologue or dialogue, it also is be represented in a word bubble. That's the only critique I have with this. I wasn't always able to tell who's talking right now because the pointers from the word bubble didn't really point at certain characters. They just pointed into
direction. To your point, like
directions.
In this panel that we see, I'll do it right there so we have two characters who are on screen. We have just simply an opening for words right there. And that's sort of very much how it goes, where occasionally you'll get some type of directional, you'll get a tail. So if I don't cover it up, you can see like there's the teeniest little thing right there, but oftentimes the dialogue is just an open circle that you just kind of, so like this one, this is where I was saying, she's leaving the circle open, and you can see a little bit of the bleed that's going in there. You can see that. But yeah, we have multiple times where there's just not a tail, and you assume that it's coming from a certain person. Oh my gosh. Let me just look at this page again. ANZUELO, the fleeting shore. We get the lightning.
I love how she's able to convey emotions through those colors. And when we talked about coloring earlier, like the range of colors from harmony to the anger, to just like disaster,
the apathy, the wanting to give up, just
as you said, you can read this without reading the words, and you get put into a mood depending on the page, and it does something with you. You won't understand the story, but you will understand the art.
Like I said, I did that in conjunction with my actual reading, and that was my favorite. I won't say that one way of reading it is better than the other. I think they support each other, but I think the fact that they both, it can be read both ways, I think is just a testament to how strong this book is. And also, again, as I'm raving about this book, because if anyone has made it this far and you haven't picked up this book, if you haven't read it, first off, I'm sorry for the spoilers, but honestly, they're not really spoilers. You should go and read it. Like, there's not a way to spoil it, because everything we're doing here is interpretations of what's actually happened. This is not a book.
Plus, you're not gonna get the book the first time anyway, so it's like, well, it's also read it multiple times. Therefore, you spoiled yourself.
I was talking with some people about it on NMC, and it was like, this is not a book about plot. Like, it's a book about themes. It's a book about interpretations. But like, I could hand you this book, and before you opened it, I could tell you all of the activities that happened there, and then you would read this and you would be like, oh, I don't feel like I got any of that from there. Like, your first read through, like, you're not going to say like, oh, well, this is disappointing because I know what's going to happen. It's like there's a very big disconnect between like the things that happen in this book and like your reading of it.
And everyone reads it differently. This is a story that can be seen from so many angles, that is depending on the reader, like the reader's experience that plays into this, the reader's mood, like however you want to read this can be read so many different ways and understood many different ways. There is not one true version, right? Like my interpretation is different than yours, doesn't mean one is right and one is wrong.
I mean, you say that, but after I do this next read through, I might be coming off my just sort of general, it's magical realism. It doesn't matter, and just go to your whole like, it's all in my head. It's all in my head reading after this.
And again, once you read it the first time it took me 2 days. I don't know what that meant in hours, but it took me
like a week to do this, because like,
okay.
And it's not that thick of, like, I think it's about 300 pages, but it's a standard size, and is, anyone who hasn't read this, there's not much dialogue that's on there, but it is still surprisingly dense because of everything that's on the page.
But when there's dialogue, there's a lot of dialogue. So I would say, I don't know. It took me 2 days, but I focused on it because I knew we were going to talk about it. But I was like, damn, I have to read this again. Not that, but like I wanted to read this again. And I read this yesterday in 4 hours. Once you read it once and you get it, you can, because most of the time to me was spent the first time reading on understanding the dialogue and what it actually meant, because so many word bubbles take you out, because again, they're not talking directly to each other. They're talking to the reader, they're talking to the higher level entity, the person, they're talking to themselves, they're talking to each other, and just understanding who is actually being addressed the first time around takes you so much longer. I think it took me a third of the time, the second time reading, just with my theory in mind. It's like, yep, checks out. And I went through this in 4 hours. And it was still a great experience. I didn't feel rushing through it. It was just more of a, okay, with certain themes in my head and knowing the end. Again, you don't pick up on the details on the first 5 pages until you read it at least once. That the glasses later on become critical. That the sentence, what does she say? If a bird,
when a bird dies,
when a bird
it should
dies,
just fly up to heaven.
Yeah, that is a reoccurring theme later on. So once you know it and you read it a second time, those sentences come like it fall into pieces way easier, and you don't need to second guess what it means in the beginning, because you know it'll show up later on again, and therefore it will be a quicker read the second time around.
Sorry, as I had that page pulled up and I was talking about that, but like looking at this, looking at the like that's some Kirby stuff right there. Like that's Kirby working as a fine artist instead of like this is, as I flip through it, like it. And also, as we're talking about this, again, if you have not read this and you have gotten through this far and you're like, I need to point out that this is a 300+ page book, hardcover, sewn binding. It is standard size, which is a little bit of a bummer. And honestly, this book should be much bigger. But for all of that, this book is $25 MSRP. $25 for a 300+ page sewn binding book. Like that is unheard of. We're at a time right now where a regular Marvel trade paperback that contains, 6 issues is going for anywhere from $20 to $25. That's clocking in somewhere about 122 to 144 pages. This is more than twice that size. Again, hardcover with sewn binding. This is not your tiny little glued binding. You wonder why it's hardcover in the first place. This is some of the. You can get that away from that. Insults me. Get that off there.
$12.
It
That's crazy. Buy 5 of them. Make sure it's sold out and they do a oversized.
100%. Like that I think is like the greatest tragedy. Like I pulled Hoopla back on this so I could try and go through at least the first few pages before we talked about this today. And I saw, because on Hoopla, yeah, it's on Hoopla. So if you have Hoopla, you can read it there. But when I was reading it on the computer, so I could see it huge stretched out, it was through Hoopla. And I saw my review that I had done there where I gave it a 5-star review. I was one of, I think, 9 reviews on Hoopla for it. And granted, Hoopla is not the most, you don't have the most comic readers there, but this book came out in like October. And you're telling me that only 8 other people read it on Hoopla and thought to review it? That's mind-boggling. This book needs to be read by more people. And granted, I never made my year-end list. I never made my video about it specifically.
You're
so
part of that. I mean, you promoted this book more than anyone I know. So kudos to you. Also, thank you for sending this to me, because I would have missed out on it 100%. I wasn't aware of the book until you made it your top pick of last year, and then I was inclined to buy it, but with shipping and stuff. I was like, ah, and then you sent it to me anyways, fairly early this year.
So with all of that, you've talked about your sort of experience reading it. What did you think about it? Is this a book you liked? Did you love it? Did you think I overhyped it? What's the Torsten read on it?
My read is the first time I liked it, was good. The second time I loved it. I gotta admit, I started a third time, but then I ran out of time earlier today. So I read for the third time. I started reading just the first 20 pages or so, just to go over it again. But yeah, I'm gonna read this again. Like I love this every time. I love it more every time I read it. And yeah, if stuff doesn't make sense, it's not meant to make sense the first time, right? So yeah, first time reading, I was like, okay. Halfway through, it's like, okay, it's good. It's not bad. It's good. But then stuff was just confusing. Like, why is this showing up? And why is this syringe in the arm of a person that doesn't even exist in the story? But again, like that's part of the beauty of getting to the end of it,
I
to know that
think
there
when
are hints.
I
There's
read
so
that,
many hints. There's so many hints at different things that there's got to be more under the surface. And I'm a person that wants to dig deeper if I feel that there's a story to be told. And this definitely has a story that's being told. It's not a character I can identify with. I still love this book. It's it hits a lot of different emotions that I would react differently to. There are lots of emotions that I feel occasionally. I react differently to them. So in my story, the character, some other characters would be in charge here. The coral kid wouldn't be at the bottom of the ocean. but again, this doesn't matter because that's Emma's story, and I love that, and I love the consistency. I don't think anything here breaks the story, um, contrary to what we discussed in DMZ, where some characters sometimes act out of place. No, this is all consistent. I love that it has. I like the ending. So again, me reading this, Nerea, I think is the dolphin, the one that turns into the dolphin later on.
like
To
I
me,
said,
that's
I
the
names.
yeah,
I
that's the happy ending for me, because to me that's the acceptance. That character brings all the other characters together, fights the career in the end, it kind of overcomes those negative memories, brings the emotions all back, brings the coral kid back, and lives happily ever after. So this has a happy ending, even though I didn't get the happy ending understanding of it the first time around. So it takes a lot of thoughts. I think you think about this book longer than you read it, and that's part of the beauty.
I I would definitely agree. Like this is a book that has stuck with me. If this was a book I read once and was like, man, that book was beautiful. I really like that. Like, and that was it. It wouldn't have been my year-end book. It wouldn't have been one that I mailed out to you. It was this was this was one that like stuck in my brain from and literally it just came about. My comic shop got an advance copy and it was just on the table. I hadn't heard of it. I vaguely knew of Emma Ríos, but literally I was just like, well, that's a beautiful cover. And it was the fact that it was $25 for this hardcover. Is like, it's 300 plus pages. Like, I'll buy that. And then it was just like, oh my God. Like, I read it. And just like you said, it stuck with me. It was a book I kept thinking about when I wasn't reading it. It made me want to go back and read it again. And that's, I think, something special. Like the books that make you do that, the ones that stick with you, that's where it's like you have something there. And in a lot of ways, comics are meant to be sort of disposable fun, where you pick up an issue, you read it, and you feel good about it, and then you put it in a bag on board and you put it in a long box, and it's done. This is not like that. This is a book that's meant to be examined. It's meant to be reread and looked at, and I think that's really special.
Yeah, and it was written like that, right? Like it came out like they never. Again, we talked about it has two parts. It doesn't have chapters. I
No,
mean,
yeah,
two,
it
maybe
was
those
an
two
OJ. It was
chapters,
always
but it
written
came like
as
that.
this collection. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a very unique style of storytelling, one that I haven't seen No, I shouldn't say I haven't seen it, but you don't see that every day. Every 10 years, there might be a book that tries to do new things. Some fail, some don't. This one does not fail. The absolute magical realism at its best. There's this movie, The Fountain, was absolutely abstract, I guess. Not only magical realism, but abstract storytelling, but still telling a story. And not just being thoughts and ideas that are being thrown around. So it's telling a story in a very unique and abstract way that is intriguing, even if you're not into the themes of internal reflection and self-awareness, mental health, and all of that. Even if you're not into that, that's still it from a unique writing style and the art, of course, it's worth picking this up, even if you want to ignore all the other big themes of this.
Well, speaking of books that come along and sort of change things up and look at things a different way, and also ones that you may not personally have experience with, at some point when I lose a bet, it's not gonna be the next one. Gonna make you think about it. But you've never read this, right?
I have read this.
I
have read it based on your recommendation about a year ago. But yeah,
I think it was actually 2 years ago.
Yeah, well, you made the recommendation 2 years ago. It took me a while to pick it up, but I've read
All
it.
right, well then, never mind. But yeah, this is another book. It's Lonely, the Center of the Earth by Zoe Thorogood. That I think is such a triumph of the medium, where she does such interesting things with the graphic novel format, layouts, medium, different things like that. And again, telling a very personal story of trauma and harm. In this one, it's very much put on the page and sort of given to you, versus ANZUELO is representational. But it's also a chance for me to show off. So we did a little doodle in mine.
Nice. Plus, you made her sign that sweet potato, I believe.
I've made her sign 2
Twice.
sweet potatoes, and yeah, and actually, the second time, it got me a discount on the page I bought from it.
Nice. No, I like the book. I like this one more. I didn't. And spoilers for It's Lonely at the Center of the Earth. It doesn't really have an ending.
I mean,
so it's very
a book about
open-ended.
her life, which has not ended,
not
and
ended,
that's kind of the whole point of
luckily.
it, so that it's not supposed to have an
No,
ending.
for sure.
It's
But I
an
was a
ending
little
of
bit
that
like,
portion.
where do we go from here? But then such is life, and there are stories like that I was just that. Yeah, no, I agree with everything you said.
So, all right. Well, I think we talked about some comics.
We did, and I'll reread this again with some other thoughts. I still have to figure out what the whale that is beached means. That's the only thing. I don't have a theory. I don't even come close to having a theory about that. I don't know if you do, but I have to figure out what the whale means.
I don't have a fully fleshed out feeling, but my feeling is based again like on a vibes reading. The whale almost seems like just inherent tragedy and sadness, because the idea is that it just shows up and there isn't anything that they can do. Like they kind of look and they're like, can we save it? And they're like, nope, it's beyond your comprehension. It's just dead. It's gone. It's there. You can't deal with it. And so there's a certain aspect of like, some things you can't get by, which to my reading is a little ancillary to it. So yeah, I don't have a full idea there, but I think it's like a deeper trauma that it's just like sometimes things just suck, and you can't do much about it.
That makes sense. With that in mind, I'll read it again. I want to thank you. I saw that the Grizzlies lost, so 2 more wins away from the playoffs here, and then 3 more series away from the finals.
I did not look at what the Celtics did today. I don't think they even played today, but it doesn't matter because they're the 2nd seed.
There you go. Thank you so much, Ben. Bunkmaster B here on Literature and Pictures. Until next time, like and subscribe this video and all that follow.
Yeah, click the thing there, click the thing there, comment down below. Tell us at what minute of the video you were like, I gotta click off this video. This has been going for 4+ hours. I can't be doing that. Tell us what minute you made it to, because that's cool. We appreciate whatever minute you did make it to.
There you go.
See ya.
See ya.